He was one of my teachers, yeah. I know, back in the day.
He was responsible for all the trail construction,
Oh,
while the ones back, behind the creek there. He started that whole
no way.
the big pieces of it as a councilman. That was a big thing for him.
Yeah, that's cool. I met with him recently. Were you there with me? No, I met with him and another parent from Moms Demand Action. They're the gun prevention, gun violence prevention group. And yeah, so he's like kind of volunteering now.
He's still staying pretty active. I know he's still part of the Conservancy group, and I'll see him at the events every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But he's enjoying retirement, so that's good for him. Did you get a chance to talk to Walter about the training update?
Mm-mm.
Looks like
But
from
it,
the notes here that you guys asked for the report back on the status of the realtor's case.
and during the last meeting, I had also asked for
Diagram of new law passed by San Diego County.
no, I had asked for information on how a subcommittee could be structured, or a standing committee could be structured in terms of stakeholder groups, or if it's just like a commission, an advisory commission that we develop, right? So it's like all the different models of stakeholder participation in advisory or voting capacity, right? Who are the members? What are their responsibilities? So I'll waiting on that information. And totally understand if it's not available today, but we'll keep at it.
Options.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. It's 8:36. We will call the meeting of the Standing Committee on Homelessness for the City of Vista to order. First, could we have a roll call from our city clerk?
The record shall reflect, but both members are present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the minutes. I don't have any changes. Mayor Franklin, do you have any changes? No. Thank you. Meeting minutes from the previous meeting are approved. And first, we'll go into our first discussion. I will say when addressing the committee to speak on an item on the agenda, please fill out a speaker slip with the number of the item you wish to speak on and give it to the clerk's staff. Speaker slips are available on the table just outside the City Council chambers. For the members of the public that are participating via Zoom, you may raise your hand to indicate you would like to speak by clicking the raise hand feature on your screen or pressing 9 on your phone. We will announce when to raise your hand to indicate you would like to make a comment on the specific item being discussed. Speakers will have 3 minutes to address the City Council. So moving into our first discussion, is on the Boyne Creek Navigation Center intakes. Program Manager Jonathan Lung will provide an overview of the intake process. And if any members of the public wish to speak on this item, they may indicate so by raising the raised hand feature, by pressing 9, or by submitting a request to speak card. Thank you, gentlemen. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good morning. My name is Jonathan Lung. I'm the Homeless Services Program Manager. Also with me is Daniel Sturman, our Management Analyst. The purpose of this discussion item, as the Deputy Mayor mentioned, is to discuss the current intake process at the Buena Creek Navigation Center and consider different options to accommodate overnight intakes. So to start, we'll have Daniel give us a brief overview of the current intake process.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor. Daniel Sturman, Management Analyst, City of Vista. Currently, intakes at the shelter are generally being held at 9 and 11 a.m.s. When clients arrive on the property, they're greeted by staff, provided a bottle of water, and we introduce them to the property, letting them know kind of what our program is all about. Individuals will have to shower and do all of their laundry on high heat to kind of prevent anything from coming into the shelter that we would not like to come into the shelter. Anything that cannot be treated in the laundry machine will be put in a heat-treated unit, which is set at about 120 degrees for the purpose of eliminating any bugs that might have slipped in any other places. After that, they complete a full intake packet, which does include things like rules and regulations, gets information about the client, demographics, needs, interests. They also sign a release of liability form, bike policy form, and we'll meet with the case manager to further understand the program's purpose. After that, they'll be shown to their room and allowed to settle into their room. If they do come with animals, animals do need to also take a shower. We have flea bath materials. Pets will also receive a flea treatment, a kennel, food if needed, treats, snacks, the whole 9 yards.
So as Daniel mentioned, currently the intakes are only available during working hours, which is generally between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday. There was some expectation by Encinitas City Council and some from Vista City Council as well that we should consider different options for overnight intakes. So staff and contractors have identified a few different options. The first one is to hold beds empty within the navigation center at all times so that when there is an overnight emergency intake, we can accommodate that immediately. There are different concerns with holding those beds empty, particularly when we do expect to operate at full capacity at all times. If we do have empty beds when we have a waiting list for referral and intake, it's hard to justify holding those beds open. There's also a lot of substantial costs in accommodating overnight intakes, which may include additional staff. For the committee's reference, there are no other shelters or navigation centers in the county that do accommodate overnight intakes. So this is a new model that we'll have to kind of consider on our own without reference to existing programs. Other options include a motel voucher program for when law enforcement identify unsheltered residents who are accepting of shelter, and they can place them into a motel for which the city may reimburse for them to be taken into the navigation center the following business day. Another potential option could be the placement of a pallet shelter on the property for which it would be held exclusively for the use of overnight intakes. Some considerations with that is that we will need to increase the electrical capacity at the property to accommodate that pallet shelter, but may not have additional operating costs, but depending on how often those overnight intakes would take place. So with those options, we're looking forward to the committee's feedback.
Thank you. I have a few clarifying questions. The days of intakes are which days currently?
Currently, they are Monday through Friday.
And this is a new term to me, pallet shelter? Pallet shelter, what is that?
So the County of San Diego has started a program trying to find agencies, churches, anybody willing to help house individuals experiencing homelessness. They have contracted with Pallet Shelter, which is I believe it's a for-profit company that makes pallet shelters. They're small living units. They've contracted for the 64 square foot unit, I believe. It's large enough to put 2 small beds, has 3 electrical outlets, and is just pretty much safe sleeping quarters. There is no plumbing in there. It is strictly just electrical with some ventilation.
Okay. I have a few more thoughts, but I'd like to hear speakers. Do we have speakers on this item? No? Okay. Mayor Franklin?
Steve, do you want to come up to the podium? I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Yes, sir. Steve Gonzalez, Homeless Solutions Manager from the City of Encinitas.
Thank you, Steve. Obviously, you don't have outreach workers on the streets after business hours, or do you?
We don't yet. We know that there is a need. We've had some late night outreach conducted in the past, and that's something that we're looking to move towards once again and potentially fulfill that need. So we have in the past and looking forward to potentially doing that again.
Can you tell us about the City of Encinitas' outreach efforts right now? How many personnel do you have? Are they contractors? Do they work directly for the city? Which contractor do they work for? What hours do they work? How many of them are there? What are their job titles?
Sure, absolutely. So there's myself and kind of jack of all trades out there conducting outreach many days throughout the week. We also have the assistance from the Office of Homeless Solution County Social Workers, and that is Chad Ryan. He is a social worker with the county. We're lucky enough to have him throughout the city anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week, depending on operational need for the county. We also have within the city the path worker. He is there at least once or twice a week, separating and also within Del Mar, Solana, Carlsbad. So along the coast, he's kind of shared a little more frequent with the other cities. Other than that, we do have the Community Resource Center, but there's no outreach being provided there. Basically just the county social worker, Path, and myself out right now conducting that outreach.
Okay. And is there plans or talk about hiring more outreach workers, or is this, for the time being, this is what you foresee being the contingent of outreach workers for?
We have a position posted right now for an additional homeless solutions coordinator that will be conducting that outreach along with me. We are also talking about contracting with another community partner potentially to add an additional outreach component. That's something that's in the works as well. And there's definitely going to be a need once, if we move to this new plan.
Sure. My thinking is that it would be unusual and probably not something that Encinitas or Vista is ever going to wind up doing, to have after hours or maybe even weekends. I mean, 5 days a week of outreach. If we're out there doing the job, I'm just thinking about for our outreach workers, if we're out there doing the job 5 days a week, 40 hours times, I need to get an updated roster. The last time I got the roster, I think we're up to like 12 people involved in the outreach mission, including Jonathan and Daniel, and we got 4 people from the county of San Diego. We've got, what are we up to now, 6 or 7 or 8 people through Exodus. The rosters continue, and then we have our cops deputies that are engaged in those efforts as well. So we have a lot of people out there. So the number of man hours on a weekly basis is pretty tremendous. My thought is that we come to know, I almost wish some of your council members that had this concern were here, because I'm sure it's a difficulty for the shelter operator. But my thought is, through the large quantity of outreach, we're going to come to know the individuals who are living unsheltered. And yeah, somebody may have a housing crisis and they may become homeless overnight, but probably we've come to know the chronically homeless population in Vista. And I know certainly our cops deputies and our outreach workers are on a first name basis with most of those people. So kind of one thing I'd like us to try and do as a thought exercise is articulate the need. Really, let's all really be on the same page about what is the need for after hours intake. When will that happen? What kind of scenarios do we see that happening? And, assuming that we've canvassed our entire population who are outdoor homeless, how often do we expect that to happen such that we would want to go to the expense of accommodating a change to the program that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we are hiring a new position, as I stated earlier, right? And the expectation with that position as well as mine, is that we are going to have outreach coverage throughout the city 7 days a week. So we are going to move towards, having the need for the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, to potentially connect with clients, and if they are, willing to accept services and be admitted into the navigation center, we want to be able to have that option as well. One of the things that we've done, as stated in the past, is the night outreach, the late night outreach, and being out on the streets and making those connections, and of course connecting with a lot of different that population that is unsheltered at that particular time during the day. We've also seen the need that we can contact a completely different segment of that population at night. Those that, for safety reasons, sleep during the day, and find a place to hide where they're not always out and about and contacted on a regular basis. And due to safety elements, at nighttime, they are active, they are out, they are wandering, and that's a great time to be able to connect with them and offer services. So that's kind of a scenario of when we would run into that particular population, because a lot of them are, for safety reasons, want to be able to sleep during the daytime where they know that there's a less of a chance of anything happening to them.
Well, that's definitely information I didn't have. So you're planning to do after hours and weekends outreach. So that
Definitely the weekends, that's going to be something that's going to be instituted 7 days a week. We want to be able to offer that service within our city. The night outreach is something we've done in the past, and definitely that still have that conversation of what that looks like and how often. I don't foresee that happening 5-7 days a week. It may be during summertime, a certain segment of the season or the year, and maybe 1 or 2 nights throughout the week.
Sure. Okay, that's good information that I didn't have before, so I appreciate that very much. I don't have any other questions for you, Steve, but I do have some questions for our
I
operator.
appreciate those questions. Let's keep it rolling.
Yeah.
You got some good ones.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Would it be okay if I go ahead and ask some questions?
Yes, please.
Can I ask Hannah? So, have you had conversations with Steve about weekend outreach? What is, I mean, I know this is not the first you're hearing about this. Tell us. It's my first opportunity to hear from you about how does this impact your operational plan? What changes are necessary? Are there additional costs? What's your response to the request?
Thank you, Mayor Franklin and Deputy Mayor Melendez. We have discussed overnight intakes at length. We philosophically would love to offer that. We understand that there is a need and we want to be available all the time. It is outside of the scope of the contract and there are additional considerations. There will be an additional cost. We'll have to make sure that there is qualified staff available either on call or standing 24 hours a day, which is substantial. We are concerned about disrupting the existing residents of the shelter by bringing someone in the middle of the night. And so the question of physically where do we put them at 2 o'clock in the morning is definitely a concern. And then if we were to take an existing employee and wake them up in the middle of the night to do an intake, there is a lack of productivity during the day after that, right? We're losing their time during regular business hours. And so essentially, we're just looking at, there's a financial cost to this.
Yep.
We believe that if we were to go by a per incidence cost, we're looking at about $600 per incidence for an overnight intake. It's less of an imposition on the weekends. It's easier to get someone on the weekends, right? We can call in a salaried case manager to come in and handle that on the weekends. It's not as big of a deal. But overnight, we're looking at $600 per incidence, which we could put that responsibility on the city using it. So if the city of Vista sent someone, the city of Vista would be responsible, whereas Encinitas would be responsible for theirs. We could increase the responsibility of an existing employee, and we put that cost at about $40,000 a year. And that's to either put someone who's hourly on salary or train someone who's not in the case manager position already, or to have an entirely dedicated nights and weekends, case manager. The cost of that employee is about $100,000 from start to finish.
Okay. Thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
Can I ask Elizabeth a question? With regard to the Alliance shelters, thank you, Hannah. I think they only do intake a few days or like 1 day a week. Is that right? Over at Interfaith? How many days a week do they do intake at Interfaith?
It's typically on if they have capacity. We haven't been able to do intake recently.
When they have, I believe from memory they were doing it like Wednesdays or Thursdays. Does anybody know? 5 days a week? Okay. There was a time when it was like 1 day a week. Maybe that was because it was capacity limited. Okay, that's what I was curious. One of the things that operators at La Posada and Interfaith have communicated with me, because I had the same question as a council person, and one of the things that was said to me, and it has begun to make some sense, is, you know, if they're willing to go at 2 a.m. and they're not willing to go at 8 a.m., you know, is this person really accepting the help, or, you know, what's really going on here? And obviously, I mean, I still think it's important when somebody wants to go to be able to accommodate them. That's obviously the whole point of, you know, why we've stood this up. But it sounds like there's going to be some pretty significant, not only financial costs, but also, I would say, maybe mental, emotional costs for staff and other residents. So I would just think, you know, if that's what Encinitas wants to do, then I would say the Encinitas Council maybe should make a request for a proposal for overnight or weekend, whatever the specific additional services. Make a request for those proposals. Let the shelter operator put down on paper what the requirements would be, and then the city of Encinitas can decide whether they want to move forward with those services. But I think for the city of Vista, I think my concern would be, thank you very much. My concern would be that everybody who's on the street this week, that we've talked to them, and if we had enough manpower that we were able to speak to everybody who's on our streets this week, if we got to them all one time, Monday through Friday, like from Monday through Friday, we accomplished the task of, you know, speaking to every one of those people. If we could say, you know, for that 5 day period, if we rest on Saturday and Sunday and we go, okay, you know, if somebody becomes, because really the people we're targeting probably, you know, even if they do pop up on a Saturday or Sunday, I don't know. I just don't know how. I mean, I definitely want to hear the weekend, you know, because $600 overnight, that's a lot of money. It certainly would make more sense if you can get somebody into a motel for the night. Would make more sense to get them into a motel than it would to spend $600 to wake somebody up and have them come in. So, you know, maybe there's a different number for, and I suppose we ought to know what it would cost, and we ought to have that prearranged and agreed to, such that if we're in that extraordinary circumstance where we all feel that that's what we want to do, we have that tool in our tool bag, and we've agreed to, you know, what it looks like. Can you, when we say do an intake, I know you have a formal intake process, but there's sort of there's the paperwork part of it and the interview, and then there's the getting somebody cleaned up, cleaning all their possessions. And it seems like it would be important to do the cleaning part probably more urgently than it would be to sit down and do the paperwork. Is it possible to do the paperwork on Monday instead of, okay, so I see you're saying yes to that. So, yeah, we should think through that. And I mean, I would want to be able to try to accommodate, you know, and I understand from staff that there was a misunderstanding maybe about what the intake hours would be, or maybe we just didn't explicitly discuss that in advance. And so we certainly want to work with Encinitas on that. So,
Thank you. I agree on some of the concerns about costs to overnight intakes. When my concerns about intakes came up, it wasn't necessarily related to overnight intakes. Last week, Mayor Franklin and I went on a ride-along with Exodus Outreach, and we got to see how some of the outreach was conducted, and also learned about the prioritization for intakes. So although there is potentially a need for overnight intakes in some specific examples, which I appreciate, Steve, the example that you brought forward, I think that there are vulnerable folks on the street who don't want to be engaged during the day. But I think overwhelmingly, my concern is how are we prioritizing the beds? And I'd like to get some clarification on that if I could. What is the current list that we're working off of right now?
Currently, excuse me, currently outreach teams from Path, Exodus, Alpha Project, and the County of San Diego send referrals to me based off of clients they have readily available to be able to bring into shelter. The first week that we were doing intakes, the intakes were being prioritized to bring individuals into a singular building, Building 4. Building 4 houses both individuals with mild to moderate disabilities and females. So during the first week, we were prioritizing individuals of those descriptions. Since then, we've been bringing in individuals that outreach workers have been sending to me and have been able to find to be able to bring in for intake.
Okay. And do we have a number of how many people are on that list of the referrals that we've gotten at this point?
I am not keeping a wait list at this time. If we were to go to a wait list type option that would be held by either myself or Retread, that's almost a full-time position, being able to track and reach out to people when it's their time up. So at this time, the onus is on the outreach teams to be able to get the shelter individuals that are ready to come in.
Okay, so we don't have a current wait list. I understand the task of following up with potential placements on a wait list. And that is a little bit confusing to me because when we were on the street doing outreach, there was an encounter that I witnessed with one of the Exodus outreach workers that stated that the client that we had encountered on the street would be not necessarily ineligible for the navigation center, but that they would be, quote, lower on the list. And so what would that have been referring to?
So the day that both yourself and the mayor were out, that was during the first week. So that was during the week that we were only doing females and individuals with mild to moderate disabilities. The individual in question was not of that description. He has since, the Exodus team has since sent me a referral packet for the individual. And if they are able to find him when we have a bed open, he is eligible for the shelter.
Okay, so we have 48 beds. And so how many have been prioritized for women and people with mild disabilities of that first building you referenced?
That would be the 24 in Building 4. 12 for women, 12 for mild to moderate disabilities.
And then for the balance of those beds, do they have any particular prioritization?
Not at this time.
Okay. I appreciate that. One of my concerns is, and I know I've heard Mayor Franklin speak on this, is that seeing that there is a higher population of males experiencing homelessness, especially chronic homelessness, definitely more resistance to shelter. I do not want us as a shelter provider to be in a position where we're turning people away who we've been trying to seek out and try and offer this alternative shelter option to them. So I understand we have those 24 beds that are prioritized for maybe people with specific vulnerabilities. Maybe they're a woman, maybe they have a disability. But if the remaining beds are not prioritized for any particular purpose, I would want to make sure that that is maintained. seeing that we don't have a wait list, I'm sure that the shelter will fill up eventually. And so what is the plan for utilizing a wait list? Or I know that there was a little bit of information I got about kind of first come, first serve model for this. So could you explain, first come, first serve versus wait list for me?
So what we're trying to accomplish here is understanding that the shelter will be operating at capacity. I'm having the outreach teams send referral packets in for confirmation that this person is eligible for the Boyne Creek Navigation Center. If that person is eligible, it's on the outreach team that when they find the individual out in the street again, they call for bed availability to see if there's something available. If there is something available and the individual's already been approved for intake, then they can come in for that intake.
Okay. And it sounds like the pallet shelter, I'm supportive of additional vouchers. I think that they're helpful in transition, especially as we increase, we fill to capacity. But the pallet shelter, it sounds like just additional beds, right? So I would want to understand the cost of that, and also if there would be a better long-term benefit of establishing more beds at a different location or at the same location. So I'm not so sure about that. The big challenge for me is not necessarily when we're providing outreach, but with all the staff that we have to do outreach, how are those encounters working towards facilitating motivation to change for those individuals? And I think that that is the protocols and the practices of our outreach are really going to be tested in our ability to motivate change for those individuals, because the way that we're marketing our shelter, it's not just simple marketing. This is a housing product, apply if you're interested. We are specifically utilizing techniques of motivational interviewing that can only be used during an encounter, right? You can only use motivational interviewing techniques when you are conducting the interview with someone. And we're not just offering the shelter. If somebody is on the street, I would expect that we're, in a way, trying to recruit them into the shelter by using these motivational interviewing techniques. So I think that that would be kind of an ongoing conversation about the way that we conduct outreach. But I'm glad to know that all outreach efforts are being funneled through Daniel Sternum, and from there we can identify maybe there is a prioritization that floats to the top, right? If we get all of these referrals for a particular population, we can consider that. But during our walk along with the outreach team, seeing potential dismissal of a young man who was on the street, I was concerned about that. So I am reassured now that the remaining of the beds are for the general population.
I'd just like to say one other thing. So because we understand that there's going to be more people that want to get in than we have availability for, the part of the referral packet is the outreach team has to provide a summary individual service plan for the individual. So the things that they've been working towards, housing goals, and pretty much a warm handoff to the case management staff. And the idea is, knowing that the individual wants to get in, the outreach team is going to continue to work to develop the individual service plan and help them accomplish goals on the individual service plan. That way, when they come into the navigation center, they are already moving towards those housing goals, which is going to increase success rates.
Okay, great. And my final question would be, we received some later add to packets for this topic. I think it's really important for our protocols to be written down, right, of who we're receiving intakes from, right, to have that written down. If that's an expanding list of outreach workers, then we can add people to the list, but I think that that's important. And then, what's the expectation for the outreach workers if they submit a referral, that they also include supplemental documentation to indicate what the client has been working on, so that they're already beginning their journey towards housing readiness when they enter the shelter. So I would advise and provide direction to staff that we have a better written documentation for these protocols, so that as we go along, if they need to be workshopped, there's something more concrete for us to review. But outside of that, I am content with our current intake process. Would you have any advisement, Mayor?
Well, we've had some discussion about this, some heated discussion. Has any progress been made to build a written prioritization list to describe our triage policy?
Yeah, part of the intake documents include a certification of homelessness chronicity, and so those are all considered
What was the word you just used? I didn't hear.
chronicity.
Chronicity.
So how, if someone is classified as chronically homeless. So similar to the VI SPIDAT, there is a vulnerability that is assessed for each of our clients, and then we could use that index to determine who should be placed into the navigation sooner.
Okay. So what are the elements of chronicity that are indexed, analyzed, collected to develop the chronicity index?
If I'm not mistaken, chronicity of homelessness defined by the Housing and Urban Development is an individual that experienced homelessness more than 3 times in 3 years, and the experience of homelessness has to be, let me get the exact wording. I believe the instance of homelessness has to be for, do you have the intake?
I'm also happy to report that later in this meeting, we'll be discussing the glossary of terms for which chronicity will be covered.
So it means an individual is not living in a place meant for human habitation, safe haven, or emergency shelter, and has been living as described for at least 12 months straight, or at least 4 separate occasions in the last 3 years, with a combined occasion equal to at least 12 months, and that each break in homelessness is included at least 7 consecutive nights of not living in the described place not meant for human habitation.
That's those are really key words. In a place not meant for human habitation. Those are the words that I didn't have in our last conversation, because I was saying to people, if it rains, they're going to get wet. That's what I meant. They're living in a place, I'm going to write that down. Let's all write that down. Not living in a place meant for human habitation. Is there a short phrase for that? Or do we use that whole phrase to describe that? The whole phrase?
Yes.
Okay. We've hit the jackpot. That's the words that I wanted, so that we could all be on the same page. Okay? My priority as mayor, as one member of the council, and I am going to ask the city council to act jointly to make very clear that our priority is, number one, for the individual not living in a place meant for human habitation. It has become my concern that the resources that have been made available at great expense to the taxpayer are being made available to people who may be living in places that are meant for human habitation, though they may be housing insecure. And though I do validate and acknowledge the legitimacy of housing insecurity, and I'm not having a thought or expressing a viewpoint that says that housing insecurity is not a significant problem. Indeed, we know it is. And I admit and confess and advertise and believe that it is. However, we need to be triaging, and our triage should be treating those people first who are in the greatest need, as defined. I like these definitions. These are making some sense. Not living in a place meant for human habitation. This is really important. This is really important. We want to know that we're getting people off of our streets. And I say off the street. What I'm really meaning is not living in a place meant for human habitation. I've had significant difficulty. I'm a pretty articulate person, but I've had significant difficulty coming to understanding with staff and service providers about what I mean. And these words make it very clear. So I just want to know that we are all on the same page with regard to the fact that we have built this. And what I heard from the mayor of Encinitas and from the council members was I heard a clear concern, not only when they came to open the navigation center, but in Mayor Kranz's interview on KPBS that aired side by side with my own. He was very clear in telling the people of Encinitas and the viewers in his interview that he intended that this was going to be to help them enforce the law in Encinitas, and that it was going to be to get people out of situations or people that not living in a place meant for human habitation. How can you assure us that the people that are being admitted to the Buena Creek Navigation Center, how many, first of all, what's the present population of individuals residing at the Navigation Center?
We currently have 36 people living in the Navigation Center, not including 3 positive placements. Of those, 18 came from a place not meant for human habitation. 1 came from a hotel or motel. 2 were unknown, and 15 did not report.
That's really good information. That's information we've never had before. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Sincerely, thank you for giving us that information.
You're welcome.
I see Pete has a thought that he wants to add.
How you doing?
I'm really good. How are you?
I just wanted to add to that number right there. That's the number that was reported in ClickUp, which was our in-house database. But actually, every person that has come to our facility has been coming from a place that's not meant for human habitation, in the sense that they've worked with an outreach worker. So we're not the ones that are vetting where I know for a fact that they're telling the truth,
Right.
but the outreach workers that are sending over the referral packets to Daniel, they have to, they are signing a paper that states that this person is not living in a place that's meant for human habitation before they're even able to send them over to us. So that number actually is 100% of the individuals.
You say that's our staff is certifying that.
The outreach workers, when
Outreach
they
workers,
send the referral packet, they send a warm handoff thing, but then they are also signing a document that says that the individual is indeed homeless. So they are signing with their initial and the name of their program that this individual that I'm working with is indeed chronically homeless.
And by your observation and experience with so we've had 39 individuals now that have been served by the
Yes, sir.
Navigation Center. So for those total of 39 individuals, the paperwork and the certification signatures set completely aside for the sake of my question, is it your experience and your opinion by your observation and your conversation with those people?
Yeah, so the individuals that had come in, we have had a few that came in that were living in the vehicle, but by definition of HUD requirement, the certificate of homelessness, it's literally a certificate of homelessness that they are filling out, the outreach worker. And so the certificate of homelessness is filled out by the outreach worker. And in that thing, the place not meant for human habitation, living in a vehicle is actually a part of that requirement. So,
by the way, I agree with that. A vehicle is a place not meant for human habitation. I'm fully on board with that.
So with that number of the 39 individuals that came in, all 39 were either street homeless or living in a car.
Okay. I think that's super important. I mean, I don't place an enormous distinction between, to me, I'd like to use the medical analogy. Living outdoors unsheltered is like a compound fracture of the leg.
Yeah.
Like the bone sticking out, it's really bad. But I would call living in the car, would be a serious fracture. Maybe it's not a compound fracture, but it's a serious fracture. It requires immediate intervention, right? So there still should be a triage level if we only have that one bed available. Yeah. But I think the important thing is, our citizens want to know, are we making an impact to get people off of the streets who are in the worst, the highest vulnerability index? That's what they want to know. That's the thing that we have to be able to say that we've investigated, we really know, and that's what we're doing. So that's super helpful. So we have 36 now.
36 individuals currently.
How many of those are people that were referred through, Encinitas versus Vista? Do you know?
Currently, we have 27 from Vista and 9 from Encinitas. We did just have 3 positive exits. We had one person that we helped navigate into a skilled nursing facility, and then we had another 2 individuals that we actually reunited with family. They went to stay with their father. Well, the father, they were a couple, and they went to the male's father's house. So
That's excellent. I love hearing about the positive exits.
Yep.
I've got some other questions, but I want to defer back to you,
Yeah, I
Chairwoman.
appreciate this line of questioning. I did have a clarifying question for you. So I really appreciate the positive exits, right? We're how many days in now? You'd mentioned it.
This is day 17.
Day 17, and we already have 3 positive exits where now those beds are available for the next cohort coming in, which is fantastic. And thank you for distinguishing between, some of the issues with safe parking versus the shelter. We do have a safe parking program, right, which is meant to triage people who are in their cars. What does the referral process, look like in that situation? Perhaps this is a question for Daniel.
Yeah, that'd be a question for Daniel.
Thank you. I know we did intake someone who was sleeping in their car. So in that situation, why the navigation center versus safe parking?
So I'd just like to start out by saying that we've had, I believe, 3 attempts from individuals sleeping in safe parking try to transition over. At this time, I don't feel it would set a good precedent if we just took referrals directly from safe parking over to the shelter, because my concern is that individuals wouldn't be utilizing the safe parking program as much, and they would pretty much just want to exclusively use the shelter. So I feel that I would appreciate some direction from council on how to, or possibly investigate how we can work with individuals wanting to leave safe parking to come in the shelter. Like Mayor Franklin said, somebody that's living in a car is a fracture, but somebody street homeless without a vehicle is compound fracture. So looking into that, I think we'll have to do some investigation on really seeing how we could support individuals that are at safe parking if they would like to come into the emergency shelter or the navigation center. But at this time, I have not been allowing for that media transfer. Like I mentioned before, it's completely up to the outreach workers on their referral process if they're trying to get clients into safe parking if they have a vehicle. There might be reasons why they would not like to go into safe parking. Some people, for example, with disabilities, it's actually detrimental to their health to be sleeping upright, and they would greatly benefit from being able to put their feet up. A lot of heart conditions require being able to have your legs elevated. Senior citizens, same type of deal. As they age, they really need to be laying down.
So there might be folks that are sleeping in their cars that have their constitution would warrant them a more emergency need for shelter versus a greater resilience and being able to stay in a safe parking.
Yeah, some people also don't feel safe in their vehicle. They have a tendency to just not feel safe in a vehicle, so they wouldn't accept the referral to safe parking. And as such, I'm assuming the outreach team referred them then to the navigation center.
Okay, I just want to make sure too that, and it's hard to track because we're getting referrals from multiple different sources. That's why I really do want to make sure that our protocols are written down for who we're receiving referrals from, because everyone has a different policy. We might have intake forms that we are requiring, right? But that person's history and how they may have been passed around from one program to the next, I want to make sure that we have all of our protocols written down. And I see here on the homeless certification form, I asked for some of these forms yesterday to be added to the packet. It's describing a homeless individual who is living in a place not meant for human habitation, but also describes an individual who has been residing in an institutional care facility for less, including jail, substance abuse, or mental health treatment facility, hospital, or other similar facility for fewer than 90 days and met all of the criteria of this definition before entering that facility. So this is why the protocols of our intake process are so important, because we could correspond with another treatment facility, right, a 90-day treatment facility, and pull intakes directly from that treatment facility. There could be benefits to that because we see a lot of, recidivism, right? Where someone, maybe they get 90 days in a behavioral health treatment facility and then they're exited and they have no shelter once again. And then it's much easier to relapse if they have a substance use disorder. The conditions for them to continue to have their health consequences of being on the street are much higher with that higher rate of recidivism. So, looking forward, the direction that I would apply is systematically, right? I mean, we only have one shelter. If we can develop really strong protocols for resolving someone's homelessness permanently, if someone's coming from a 90-day treatment facility, would they be more successful in finding housing and doing a quick turnaround in our navigation center versus someone who's coming in fresh off the street, has never had a treatment opportunity? And I do know that some of the linkages that you will provide when someone's coming in off the street could be to a behavioral health center too. So you guys are triaging people all sorts of different ways, and I think that we should be outlining the protocols for that so that it's consistent and measurable. We can have measurable outcomes for and what we expect to see from people as they're coming and going. So I did want to make a note of that some of our institutional care facilities could also be a definition of a homeless experience. Please, Mayor Franklin, I know you have further questions.
Pete, I got a couple more questions for you. Did I write down correctly, 18 were unidentified or declined to identify where they were coming from? No, that was 18 from Vista One Hotel, 2 unknown. What was the number?
So the
15 were unknown.
15 were not data reported. This is also because, like we said, we're on day 17 right now.
Right.
And we officially just got all of our case managers HMIS trained and qualified. So as of yesterday was our last person. So we are going to be doing our intakes now through HMIS, which has these questions a little bit more, I guess, secure and like verified and just more streamlined and efficient than what we were previously using through ClickUp, which was like our in-house database. So we're going to be using ClickUp for things that Clarity does not provide. But now that we have HMIS, these numbers will look a lot more efficient, a lot more like true to source, I guess. And so, yeah, that's the reason for that right there.
Got it.
Of my knowledge and my experience with the people that I've been working with and talking with and with my case managers, every person that has come into our facility has come from a place that's not meant for human habitation. And on top of that, we have had the one person that had a one-night stay in a hotel, but they were at a place not meant for human habitation. That's where you see the hotel on that one. And then also the hospital, we did have a person that was actually experiencing homelessness for 40 years, but he came from a hospital. So like that individual, I would, by my definition, even though he came from a hospital, he came from an outreach worker that was already working with him, and he happened to be in the hospital. So it was kind of like a safe transition instead of like transitioning him from the hospital back to the streets and then bringing him over there. It just worked out that the outreach worker was still in connection with that individual while he was in the hospital, and we transported him directly from the hospital to our program. And that was, I think that was even a referral from Deputy Mayor Katie Melendez of.
That was the individual that was residing
Homelessness.
between the Stater Brothers and CVS on North Santa Fe.
Good.
if you would like a quick update on him, just
Sure.
I'm a big guy on success stories. I'm a big guy on sharing stories. This individual, he had been experiencing homelessness for 40 years. This is someone that the reason why he was even in the hospital was because he defecated in his pants and had been sitting in it for 3 weeks before he was found by the outreach worker. And so that's why he was in the hospital and for his leg. And then he's come to us, and my staff has been incredible. And just having this navigation center open for individuals like him has been astronomically incredible. Since being with us, he was able to get his California ID. He's now has a primary care physician. And now through investigation, we actually found that he was a disabled dependent of a chief in the U.S. Navy during the World War II. So his father was actually a chief in World War II. And because he was born with cerebral palsy, he was a disabled dependent of his father. And so we actually now found out that he's eligible for VA benefits. And so this was through the intensive case management that only a navigation center can provide. This individual was homeless for 40 years and did not know that he was eligible for VA benefits. And because of a short stay of only 2 weeks with us, he now has a primary care physician, and we've figured out that he might even be able to fully qualify for VA benefits. So and then he knows his social security number of his father. And so if his father was even allotted money from the VA because of him being a disabled dependent of his father, he might even have an income coming his way. So I just want to thank you guys for opening up a navigation center like this and giving us the opportunity to help these individuals. So,
Thanks for sharing that story. That's really powerful. Still living at the navigation
Yes.
center? All
Yes,
right.
sir.
We look forward to hearing about him finding his way into permanent housing.
Yeah.
I mean, he sounds like with his medical conditions, he might be actually, and he's coming out of the hospital. That sounds like somebody who is really fits the specific purpose for the what's the name of the care facility in Interfaith now? It's the
Recuperative care?
recuperative care. Yes, he sounds like somebody that would really actually meet the definition for recuperative care.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty nice facility where I think it's a private room over there. Yeah, it's a hotel. I'm sure you've been over there.
Okay.
But, so maybe that's a longer term possibility for him if he qualifies for it, because that's really, they have the special needs for people that are recuperating from medical
Absolutely.
trauma. That's great. B, thank you. Yes. Actually, before you leave, one more question. So, and I understand you're getting this information from the outreach workers that are sending it to you. I would love to see that after the navigation center staff has the opportunity to build some rapport and relationship, that they're able to increase and augment the information that's available so that we get really accurate information. As I just appreciate that we're all getting aligned and on the same page about who we want to serve first, even though there's this enormous population of people who are somewhere on the spectrum of need, right? But somebody's got to be first in line because of the priority of their need. And so I appreciate that we're getting aligned with regard to that. I would like to know if there's more information. I'd like us to talk and think about a voluntary disclosure of some information. We've talked a lot about collecting and reporting information. Again, I'm not looking for personally identifiable information here, but if there's information, and I don't have a list of things right now, but I just want to float this idea. If there's information that would help us better understand who's being served, where they're coming from, and if they're willing to voluntarily disclose that information to policymakers and to help us build a compendium and a data set to really understand where people are coming from and what their challenges are upon arrival, that would be super helpful. So, it could be as simple as, hey, here's a list of questions that policymakers have. Would you be willing to disclose this information? If so, can you sign here? And we could work together to figure out what the right questions are and what the wrong questions are that we don't want to ask people to disclose, because we are trying to protect people's privacy. But at the same time, we need to know what people's circumstances are so that we can better improve the offering that we have. So I just want to give that to you to think about, everybody in the room, but particularly you at Retread, because you'd be the ones that would have the opportunity to present somebody with that. So.
If I could speak to that, Mayor, we're talking about intake right now, but I think it's also relevant conversation for, exiting, and perhaps we have an exit survey.
Absolutely.
I think that it can be sensitive to have an exit survey because this is feedback I've gotten from service providers. It can be sensitive providing a survey because, if you're really being honest and saying what you really liked about the shelter and what you didn't like about the shelter and how it actually helped you and how it helped you recover from your circumstances, it might be hard for someone to offer that to the group that is in charge of their shelter stay. So we might want to just think about the way that we can sensitively do that. But I think some sort of survey I would be supportive of that. And also the additional information that you're requesting, if there's a way for us to pull that data out of, the information that we're putting into HMIS, right? Are we collecting information about where people are coming from, right? To know if the majority of people are coming from one place or another. I think that those data points are important for policymaking.
Absolutely. Here's another really big one, because when you and I went out with outreach workers and we did see somebody who said that they wanted help, they wanted to go to the shelter, but we weren't able to accommodate them. To me, I want a full memo. I want a whole page report. I want to know why. If somebody wanted to go and we couldn't take them, go back to your office and write me a report. I want to know exactly why we couldn't accommodate that person. I'm equally as interested in the declines as I am in the acceptances. I want to know who's being declined services and why. I really want to know that, because I think that tells an equally important part of the story.
Right, being denied services or declining services, I think that we've had an ongoing conversation of, how do we get people into this shelter? And our enforcement measures are limited, but our motivational interviewing opportunities are expansive, right? We can be having better encounters with people where we're using better professional skill sets to make sure that we're covering all of the opportunities to motivate someone to change. And if we're not doing that, enforcement is going to be a very strong-armed approach to get someone into a safer place. But right now, I'm really evaluating how are we intaking people, right? Also, the denials are important, but what does a successful intake look like, right? What are the techniques that you're using as a team here to successfully bring people in? And again, what's the protocol? How's it written down so that we can replicate that again and again?
Pete, thanks. I got a couple of questions for staff here. Absolutely. And maybe you'll have a relevant thought on this too. Particularly with regard to seniors, we have the, Mr. Conley, what's the name of the group that's doing the senior housing that we gave them $500,000? National Corps?
National Corps, correct.
Have we had a conversation with them to discuss accepting individuals that are coming out of the Buena Creek NAV Center into their program? When does that come online?
That's projected to be completed in September.
So I assume that they're already taking applications. All of our other low-income projects were full on the day that we cut the ribbon. They were completely full. So I imagine that they're already taking applications. So I want to know, have we had a conversation? Do we have a stack of applications? Does Navigation Center staff know that the city has invested $500,000 into a senior affordable housing project? And have we said to National Court, hey, we gave you $500,000, guess what we want now? We want to have some access for some vulnerable people that are seniors coming out of the Nav Center. So, Mr. Lung, is that happening?
It is not. So unfortunately, of course, the city did contribute $500,000 to the project. The project, I think, is something like a $20 million project. So unfortunately, the local contribution is pretty insubstantial. But more importantly, a lot of the intake eligibility is dependent on the funding source. So there's a lot of county funds in it. So the county has the first priority for what that eligibility will look like. But I am happy to report that with the 2 surplus land act properties that the council and the committee are aware of, those we have started conversations with the developer to include some local preference for which we can include the BCNC.
But my question is, who is it going to be you? And I think maybe it should be you. Who is going to reach out to National Court and the county and ask? Maybe we have no license to demand, but we certainly have the right to ask. If you don't ask, you don't get.
That's
is
right.
something I learned a long time ago.
Yeah.
So when will you ask the county and National Court to come and tour the Navigation Center? And when will we beseech them to build a partnership with us? Is that something we can do next week with a phone call to get on the calendar?
Yeah, I'm happy to report we've already begun those discussions. So we have determined that we just need to include something in our regulatory agreement to include that local preference, and it will be accommodated.
So, no, you misunderstand. So I'm not talking about something as formal as a written agreement. What I am asking is, I will attend, the deputy mayor might want to attend. I would like to, on behalf of the mayor, extend an invitation to National Corps to tour the Navigation Center. And I would personally like to have a conversation with them about allowing us access. I just want to make the introduction and do a handoff. As I've often asked Exodus to go see some service that's available. I'm just trying to make sure that we know each other's names, have each other's phone numbers, know what the resources are that are available. And it's right here in Vista. It's on the same road. It's on North Santa Fe instead of South, but it's on the same street as the Nav Center. So it would be, malpractice in the extreme if we didn't introduce those folks and make sure that they have that resource. So I'm asking you to extend on behalf of the mayor the opportunity in coordination with Hannah and Pete to tour the Nav Center so that we can show them what we're doing and we can ask them in humble terms because we only gave them $500,000. But I think that entitles us to be able to ask, hey, is there a way that you can accommodate some folks here? And that would be pleasing to us.
Yep.
So, and if you want to do another project with the city of Vista and you want $500,000 for your next one, or you want to, here's your opportunity to show us that you're our friend. Let's leverage whatever we've got, even if it's just kindness and a smile. But I want to link those folks up. Same thing with our veterans opportunities. I know we have some veteran opportunities at the Artist Village. That would be good with all of our low-income projects. Frankly, all of our low-income project operators should have the opportunity, and we should be asking, how can we get some of these folks into your housing facilities? That should be, one of the things we always heard in the past from shelter operators is there's nowhere to house people. There's no housing. So particularly when you get people into housing, or when you can't get people into housing, we really need to hear about that, because we don't have the information other than just being told there's not enough, but we need better specifics about why somebody didn't qualify. Because here's the problem, we got a proposal for these 2 pieces of land that are close to each other, across the street from each other. And council had a really specific discussion about what kind of affordable housing we wanted to have on that property. And I was very unhappy with the proposals that came back because they were not targeted to the population that I felt that we needed to serve there. So, not all affordable projects are built equally. So when you're encountering hurdles, in the past, like we got from the Alliance, we got 3 words, bed not available, which is, I felt very insulted by, because it was clearly an attempt not to be elaborative in their communication with us, even though we're the ones authorizing the resources, so it made me very unhappy. So the more elaborative that we can be and the more information you can give us, we want to get synced up, and we want to help you tackle the challenges that you face in helping people find permanent housing opportunities. And I feel like that's the next step in this that we really need to tackle. I'll just reiterate, because I'm going to keep reiterating my concern that there's so many resources available for the homeless and housing insecure that are not finding the mark. In other words, they're not solving the problem, and the problem continues to grow larger and larger. So we really need to ask some tough questions about who these resources are being consumed by, if not by the population that we intend to consume them. So that's all I have for the moment. I'm definitely interested to hear, by the way, from our Sergeant and Deputy Peterson about their experience, if they have any so far, with being able to refer people. Or have you had any interchange at all with the Navigation Center yet? Anything that you could share with us? If not, that's okay. But it would be my hope that Deputy Peterson and the cops team would tell us, hey, here's some folks that I've worked with that I know are out there, and I've seen them get into the Nav Center. So I'm not getting an affirmative head nod there, but this is what I am asking as one member of the council, is a month from now when we do this again, I would like to get some affirmative head nods. I'd like to know that people that you're encountering through our cops team, I'd like to know that, number one, they've been offered. And number two, I'd love to just get one. Let's start with one and then we can get 10. But I'd like to know that some of the people that the cops team is encountering are making their way into our Nav Center. Because, I don't know if it's politically correct, but those are some of our problem customers, right? Those are people that the citizenry are calling to complain about illegal activity, public urination, defecation. So I'd like to know that, I know they're coming into contact with our most difficult to serve homeless clientele. I like to make sure that we're definitely offering, and I'd like to get some communication about, one of the things that I asked us, did we get a photographer over there before it was all full up and take some pictures? It was so nicely decorated a few days after opening. Did we get some pictures? Good. I would like to have some of those pictures. And did we make our outreach workers a nice picture book where they could show somebody this beautiful facility so that they could say, this is the place. Let's print them up a little brochure that we can leave with them. Take a picture of the meals. Take a picture of the staff. Put pictures of the bed, of the kitchen area, of the whatever, in there. And if they won't go today, leave them that brochure. You go, when we come back, we want you to think about, Monday morning, we're here to ask you if you want to go to the Navigation Center. And you said no, so we're showing you this thing. We're going to leave this little brochure with you. And we're going to let you think about, you could be in this warm bed, taking this hot shower, eating this hot meal. And when we come back, and then by the way, maybe you're going to show that to the other people in the encampment and go, hey, maybe let's go together. Because maybe maybe I'm not going without my companion, but maybe I decide I want to convince my companion to go. But how are we showing the people who are, chronically homeless, how are we showing them this beautiful thing we have without a picture? So have you gotten a hold of the pictures yet? Have our Exodus folks got them? Have you been able to produce these pictures in a way that the folks that you're reaching out to can see them? And are you getting really positive feedback? Are they looking at this and going, wow, yeah, come on up. Come on up. Are they looking at this and going, wow, this is like so much better than other offerings we've seen?
Well, it certainly yielded some successful placements,
Well, that's good.
for sure. We have, as of yesterday, successfully placed 16 individuals.
That's great. So the pictures are helping.
They're helping, for
Awesome.
sure.
Good. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really supportive of that, and thank you for bringing that idea forward, Mayor. I talked earlier about marketing, how it's more than marketing, it's motivational interviewing.
Right.
And we're working with a community that is extremely traumatized and in survival mode, that sometimes very clear imagery and very simple descriptions can be helpful to uncomplicate the decision. So when we're trying to motivate someone to make the right decision for themselves, let's give them all the tools and imagery so that they can see the potential life for themselves and start to move forward towards that motivation to change. So I'm supportive of that. And I think if we're good on the questions for this discussion item, I don't have any further discussion. We can continue. Anything else?
I just want to say thanks to everybody. We're making some real headway in understanding what's going on and getting on the same page. And, you know, this has been really healthy and good, and really excited to hear these results. And just, Steve, thank you. No, you got something to add? Please.
Just want to clarify that the city of Encinitas at this time does not have any plans to conduct night outreach. That was an example of how we've done it in the past. And the new staff member that we do have is strictly for the weekend outreach that we plan to add to our strategy.
That's great that you're adding weekends. I think that's
Yeah, and I just want to clarify that, we do not have at this time plans for, evening or night outreach.
Got it.
Totally fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, thank you to everyone. Great discussion on shelter intakes. And thank you for your questions and discussion, Mayor. We can move along to item 2 regarding trespass authorization letter and signage. Program Manager Jonathan Lung will review the materials for us. If any members of the public wish to speak on this item, they may indicate so by using the raise hand feature or by pressing 9 or by submitting a request to speak card. So let's get the update on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Steve and our retread team and Exodus. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As mentioned, so this discussion item is to recommend the implementation of some no trespass signage in conjunction with a trespass authorization letter that is on file with the Sheriff's Department. So a brief overview of how the letter works currently is that it is accessible online for businesses to complete, have notarized, and file with the Sheriff's Department for 12 months at a time. It allows sheriff's deputies to come and have agency and the ability to remove trespassers without the presence of the owner. The penal code that covers this ability also requires that a signage also be present at the property. And so staff has considered and discussed with both Sheriff's Department representatives and City's Attorney's Office to consider 2 different signs, both of the same verbiage, but just different orientations. One being a portrait and one being a landscape orientation. But this image here demonstrates the one orientation for the council to consider and provide some feedback. I'll also add too, so at the last standing committee meeting, each committee member recommended 2 different businesses for such signage to be implemented on, both within the downtown area. There are currently 309 active business licenses within the Business Improvement District, so staff is recommending an initial implementation within the downtown district for these signs before being implemented citywide. We're looking forward to the committee's feedback.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers on this item? No? Okay. So this is in compliance with state law. We have to have essentially a notarized authorization. Okay. I don't see any problem with the signage. I think it's important for us to move forward with this to give a greater opportunity for enforcement, especially for our residents that have been continuously making complaints about this issue. So thank you for completing this task. I think it's an important aspect to our strategic plan. Mayor?
Yeah, Sergeant, can I ask you some questions about these no trespassing signs? We talked a little bit about this in the meeting that we had last week, but what are the specific circumstances under which a sign of this nature, because obviously if I have a business that's open to the public, I can't just put a no trespassing sign up, right? I mean, in other words, no trespassing sign would basically function where I have a place that's closed to the public. Is that correct?
No. You
Okay,
can
tell
have
me how this works.
You can have a no trespass sign, but with that being said, you have to have a letter that's paralleled with that. So it's associated with that. So if you don't want people hanging out in front of your business, blocking the pathways, whatever it may be, absolutely, just because the business is open doesn't mean that you can't have a no trespass authorization letter on file.
And tell me, does the no trespass authorization letter have to name these specific individuals?
No.
It can just say any person not engaged in the conduct of
Doesn't even have to say
business?
that.
What would it say? Do we have any sample letters that we've given
That's it
to-
right there, and the sample letter is online for the no trespass arrest authorization. So that's it. That's from our legal department. So no, you don't have to have an individual's name.
Could I maybe ask a clarifying question as well? So for just the simple community's understanding of this, would trespassing be considered any entry that's not invited? What exactly would trespassing be? Because I'm understanding the concern that a no trespassing sign on a local business could be a deterrent for people to enter. But if you're going into the business on an invited capacity, you're going to go buy a cup of coffee, right? You're having an exchange that's welcomed. That wouldn't be trespassing.
No, it's all based on the business.
Okay, so if a business owner identifies, okay, this person's trespassing because they're coming in without being invited, or they're violating our rules, right, of this private business, at what point would it be considered trespassing? Is it really up to that business owner at that point to be able to assert what trespassing is for them?
It is when they ask them to leave and they say no.
Okay, great.
So perfect example, Starbucks, one of our unhoused individuals goes in and takes a bath in the restroom. You need to go. I'm not leaving. I'm going to barricade myself in the bathroom. Law enforcement shows up to address the trespassing issue.
At that point, would they need to sign the,
It's already signed, so that's online. So once they sign that no trespass authorization, it's notarized, they don't have to sign it again.
so the protocol for a business is you get the signage, you sign the certificate, and then when there's an incident like the one you're describing, there's a greater ability for enforcement to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to clarify that this sign is not necessary to enforce no trespassing.
No, it's not.
It's helpful, and I'm really trying to draw out so that anybody that's watching, and so that we can give advice to business owners when this sign would be helpful and exactly how it's helpful in helping you enforce the law.
Sure. So just like we talked about in our meeting, any added entity with extra notification is always going to be better, right? So the verbal notification of you're not allowed to be here, that's one thing. But if you have a sign that's paired with that, and then law enforcement responding and now asking you to leave, and now let's get into that as well. If we come and ask these folks to leave and they say okay, perfectly fine. If they say no, that's when we can take action, right? So with that being said, yes, the sign is appropriate in every aspect of that to allow the population to understand there is no trespassing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You don't need it, but it's definitely an added barrier.
Yeah, it accomplishes, if you arrive on scene and you've got the no trespass letter, now you know that this individual has been or should be reasonably aware that they're not allowed to trespass.
Yeah, because their defense is going to be, well, there's no trespass sign.
Yeah.
So when our deputies arrive on scene and they see trash and a pillow or whatever it may be, and there's a no trespass sign right above them, and we take a photograph of that, there's no questions. So it's very clean.
And I appreciate the commentary on this and some of the situations you're describing of facility use, right, or misuse. I don't know if it would be appropriate to even place the sign in certain areas. Does it need to be at the front of a location, or could it be in the bathroom?
So you're probably not going to put a no trespass sign in a restroom. You'd probably place it on the outside of the business.
Okay. To ensure no trespassing in the entire facility, even if they're experiencing chronic restroom misuse.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Anything else?
I have a couple of other questions. I'm not sure if you'll have input on them or not. With regard to notary services, do we provide notary services here at the City of Vista?
Yes, the clerk's office provides them.
And do we charge a fee for that?
It's $10, I believe. $15.
So if we need to bring this before the council, then I'd like to agendize it to come before the council. I'd like to waive the $15 for the specific notarization of the no trespass form, because the city has a compelling interest in these forms being on file.
Yeah.
I'd like to provide that service for free. I don't know if the deputy mayor agrees, but I'd like to offer that as a service so we can induce and encourage people.
We will look into whether it needs to come back to council or not, but we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that as well.
Okay, great.
No problem.
And ultimately, my long-term vision is that we're going to have staff or contractors will go out with have 100 of these things that are blank, and they'll be able to get their pen, write in the specifics, and that they will be notary publics, and that they'll be able to get somebody, that they'll be educated to be able to explain it to business owners, and it will really be able to increase the number. That way, when our deputies do see folks, and ultimately, how do you know whether or not somebody has a no trespass letter? Do you have to call the city and ask?
No, we have it on file. So obviously in our patrol vehicles, we've got a computer and we have access to the no trespass letters that are on file.
Okay.
And the greatest component of this new legislation is that the trespass arrest authorization is good for a year. Before it was for 30 days. So these businesses had to keep up a letter every 30 days. Now there's an added entity of having to have it notarized, but a greater component of that is you only have to do it once throughout the entire year, which is fantastic.
And I had made a request of our city attorney's office to review that new legislation. Have you reviewed the legislation that requires the notarization?
It's PC 602 subsections O, I believe, that requires the notarization.
It's a brand new law that just took
Yes.
effect this year.
Yes.
My question specifically is, because I haven't studied the legislation personally, I need to take a closer look at it, but I just want to understand, is it our belief that it requires a notary on every one of those forms? There's no context or nuance to it. There is no, we can't even do a 30-day without the notary. There's no circumstance under which a form is acceptable for no trespass now without the notary.
No, you need the notary.
Okay, all right. And I just want to make a general statement to the public that's watching. The state legislature is to be rebuked and condemned for the fact that they required a notary for this. It made it more difficult for business owners. I'm glad that, it was already in San Marcos, they were already honoring it for a year. We never figured out why Sheriff's Council said it's good for 12 months in San Marcos and 30 days in Vista. We never figured that out.
I don't necessarily think that was correct.
Okay.
So, and one of the ways that they were getting around it was a closed business. So if you have a closed piece of property with fencing or whatever it is around it that nobody has access to, you were good for a year. Outside of that, it should have been every 30 days.
Well, I just want to generally express, not to anybody in this room, just for those who are watching, I want to express my displeasure with the state legislature and the governor for imposing that notary requirement. It's an onerous requirement that will reduce the number of letters that we receive, not increase them. This was an attempt by the state of California to increase trespassing and decrease the tools of law enforcement, and it really makes me angry And I just want everybody that sees this today to know that they should be contacting their state senator and their state assembly person and expressing their displeasure with the requirement of a notarization, because it's a significant burden and a hurdle for a property owner to have to overcome. But I'm hopeful that we can, as a city, offer great tools to make it easier and more convenient for our business owners. So we'll use it as an opportunity. Do you have any other observations that are relevant to our work on the committee? Anything that you're coming across out there that, you know, we would benefit so much from your suggestions about how we can, you know, and I know you know, what the problems are that are most immediate that we really want to make an impact on. I want the community to notice that we are stepping up and solving the problem. I want people to say across the kitchen table, you know, the city's doing a great job. And I think you know what it will take for our residents to observe that. Do you have any thoughts or input on what we could do better?
We do talk about this quite often, and Vista it's an interesting melting pot of individuals. Number one, we have a jail facility that's here. So outreach is also very difficult, right? Because a number of these people are truly transient. They are released from the jail in our city, and they're here for a couple of days, and then they move on. So our outreach workers may get an opportunity to talk to those folks and have these conversations. However, in 2 days, when they come back to maybe meet them again, they've moved on, they're gone. They're back to the city of interest, Escondido, Oceanside, Carlsbad, whatever it may be. So it's an interesting situation specifically for us. So our team is out almost every day. And you asked the question earlier, are we offering these services? We have to. So on top of that, our deputies are providing and offering resources. However, it is the intake procedures and so forth. They are difficult to get through. And a lot of the times, the folks that the deputies are dealing with out in the field, they're under the influence, whether it be of alcohol or some sort of controlled substance. They are not in the right mind at that point in time to accept resources. So we have other avenues that we need to deal with. So their job is very difficult in the sense the population that they're dealing with and of the time that they're dealing with them. So night outreach and all of these different things, this is something that we're gonna have to table and talk about with the team when we get back. But yeah, it's very difficult, so.
Yeah, and
Thank you. If I may, I want to make sure we're staying on top of for the agenda, but I did request during our last meeting that we invite our COPS team to give a presentation for the standing committee, because we wanted to have oversight of the internal working group, of our homelessness internal working group. And I know that you guys are seeing things on the ground that are extremely challenging and are important enforcement efforts that need to be made. One clarifying question, would you be able to identify what the status is of the majority of people who are trespassing? Are they under the influence?
It just depends. Number one, unfortunately, we're not statisticians. So we come across, I mean, JP, Sam, the rest of the team, if you were to think about the 7 deputies going out on a regular 10-hour day, they very well may come across 50 individuals, maybe more, depending upon the day. On top of that, our patrol team that's responding to calls, and then on their time off, being proactive and doing proactive police work. It varies. I couldn't give you a number, and I don't even want to guess. So it's a very difficult question to answer, because you would have to have somebody going out and keeping stats on every single contact and what you possibly think they could be under the influence of. Sometimes they're under the influence, but they don't meet the criteria of an arrest. So they could be under the influence. They may have used, 9 hours ago. They're still under the influence of that time, but they're not creating any sort of the word I'm looking for, any sort of
disturbance
issue out in the public at that time. So they may be talked to, and they may be under the influence, but they're not totally under the influence. If you think about having a glass of wine versus having 7 glasses of wine, completely different story. So,
Right, so you're dealing with very varied experiences, but overwhelmingly, when there's a trespassing issue, why are people trespassing? You described earlier that there may be using the facilities, right? Maybe they're having behavioral health issues where they're being belligerent and refusing to be normal, right, and act appropriately.
sure, it's, we're not going to trespass. It's as simple as that. There's a specific population that trespasses. I think the mayor was out at one point in time, I think you were out with us, Mayor, and there was an individual that was sitting, we were on Sycamore, he was eating some of the, I think it was Jack in the Box over there, and he was sitting outside, and you said, can you go arrest that guy for trespassing? We said, that's a very good question, however, we can't. He just bought food from that store. So it's not, there's a very specific population, and generally it's going to be, I use the term transient because that's what it is, generally speaking. Unhoused, whatever term we want to use, they move from place to place, and we disperse them. So we go and we meet with them here, and then we move them along. That's the definition of transient. So it's generally those folks. And the Sycamore area and that corridor, they are given money, so they continue to go back out there. They continue to panhandle. Panhandling is no longer illegal in the state of California. So people can stand in the middle of the roadway on the center divide, and they can ask for money. They can ask for help. It's not against the law.
I think that's really important information that you're sharing, right? That despite the activities being allowed, right, to go purchase food, right, because of the nature of the population that you're describing, that they're kind of going from place to place, it's clear that residences and businesses throughout these major corridors where people are traveling are really being affected. So I'm glad that we're doing this, that we're putting forward more opportunities for enforcement for trespassing, and completely support any way we can reduce any barriers for the private property owners there.
It's an interesting thing because you have the business owners and you have the folks that are going there to visit those businesses, and then you have people that utilize those businesses because there's an awning and there's a safe haven away from weather or whatever it may be. And then when those business owners, or say for instance during the summertime, a college student who's working there arrives at 6 in the morning and sees somebody sleeping in front of the door that they're supposed to go into. These are the issues that we're having. And now we have this 19-year-old college student who's never had to deal with anything like this have to deal with this issue.
Right.
And now that person who's laying on the ground who gets woken up by this so-called worker, they start getting into an argument. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So how to answer that question and how to change it, I'm not the one to do that.
Certainly, but I do appreciate all the actions that you're taking for enforcement, and I think that with your suggestion, Mayor, of the booklet, right, for someone who is trying to seek refuge, right, being able to show them there's a better place for you to be and for you to recover and get some shade. You know, we have a number of services at the city that we can be directing people to. So, Mayor, I'd love to continue to hear your questions.
Last thought on the panhandling, though the state of California has made that illegal, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because you stood there with me when one individual bragged about making $400 a day in the Sycamore area, and a lot of those individuals are not even necessarily homeless who are panhandling, but they are defrauding the public into the idea that they are. Some are homeless, but many are not. But with regard to those individuals who disrupt the flow of traffic or present a danger to themselves and the motoring public because they are entering the lane of travel, that is still a crime that we can enforce. Is that right?
It is, but now think about it. Now, it's an infraction to do that,
right?
right? And say, for instance, they take it to court, and there's a commissioner that's standing there. And they're sitting there, and the commissioner says, so articulate what happened. And the defendant is standing there and says, well, this is what's going on in my life. And yes, I was in traffic, but it was during a red light, and there was no flow of traffic at that time. And as soon as that light is ready to turn green, because I watch the crosswalks, I step up onto that center median.
Yeah, I appreciate that they may find some sympathy in the courtroom.
I'm just saying,
But-
so yes, there's a way to articulate it.
Right.
And getting into the flow of traffic, is the juice worth the squeeze, and so forth.
Yeah.
But you're right, and there's another way of going about that, and that's with more of a significant arrest, being under the influence of something, or
I just want to be clear that we're not tolerant of it, and we will use the law enforcement tools that are at our disposal because it is an unwanted behavior. And so the fact that commissioners, judges, the state legislature, the fact that they are wrong-minded about it should not mean that we also are wrong-minded or that we give up on our efforts to enforce. If we can lawfully, I would want to define loitering on the median as a danger to persons, and I would want to prohibit under the city ordinance, if the state ordinance does not prohibit it, I would want to define loitering on a median as an unsafe activity that is unlawful.
Mr. Mayor, I hate to interrupt. However, I do believe we're
wanted your
going beyond the
opinions.
scope of D2 with respect to the action item, which is the trespass authorization letter and signage. Perhaps your recommendation or your direction is better fit under D6.
I'd be happy to discuss it again under D6.
you.
Thank you, Sergeant, for being available for questions and for enforcing the no trespassing. Appreciate it.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Great. With no further discussion, we can move right along to D3, which will be about the Alliance for Regional Solutions Shelter Network. Program Manager Lung will provide the report. If any members of the public wish to speak on this item, they may indicate so by using the raise hand feature, by pressing 9, or by submitting a request to speak card. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you again. Yeah, so staff would like to provide just a quick update on the status of the Alliance for Regional Solutions Shelter Network contract. This contract, of course, was signed to be effective starting in October 2023 through September 2024. This new contract, which has changed from the prior 3 years, has gone to a per diem basis that the city would pay the Alliance Network on a per shelter bed night for the Vista residents that are sheltering within those different shelters, as opposed to a $200,000 contract that is paid in quarterly basis. So we had just received the most recent report, which covered through January, and the full $200,000 contract ceiling has been reached. Within that time period, which is October 2023 through January 2024, 51 Vista residents received 2,323 bed nights within the shelter network. So far, there have been 3 successful exits to permanent housing. And the cost, of course, is variable by shelter and is displayed in the graphic above, with the average shelter bed night costing $84.03 with a weighted average of $87.99. Staff does expect to provide a deeper analysis of the next plan workshop to discuss the implementation of the strategic plan, but is open to any questions with any of this preliminary data.
Thank you. I will note that it looks like we are more successful in positively exiting clients. I'm glad we still have these options available, but when the goal is to resolve someone's homelessness permanently, I definitely want to see more from our adjacent shelter network in that regard. Mayor, any questions?
Yes. I would like, when we get this report, I'd like to know how many nights at each of the providers. So we see Operation Hope, La Posada, Haven House, and on and on. And I'd like to know how many nights at each of those so that we can understand how the Alliance is, allocating these resources that we've authorized the maximum amount.
We'll have that data with the plan workshop. Yep, we do have it.
Be good. So now we prorated this amount. Let's see. So from October, when did the $200,000, when did that amount begin under the new contract?
That was the same since October 2020. But now what's happened is
2023.
2020. So this is the fourth year of the contract we've had with the Alliance. This is the first year we've gone to the per diem basis.
Right.
The prior 3 years, we paid the $200,000 on a quarterly basis.
Right. But I'm saying, we began a new contract in October 2023, yes?
Yes.
And at that time, did we authorize did we begin a new program year at that point?
Yes.
Okay, so we've consumed $200,000 on a per diem basis
That's correct.
in 6 months.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll also note for the committee's consideration, the Alliance will continue to provide reports through September 2024, so we will continue to collect additional data of Vista residents being sheltered after the funds have been completely expended.
Do we have an anticipated timeline for that based on our current spending of when we're expected to hit that ceiling?
Well, the ceiling's already been reached. So yeah, we've spent it now, and then the Alliance will continue to report on Vista demographics through the end of the contract term, which is September. Yeah.
For the reporting?
Yep, you
Okay,
got it.
I understand.
Yep.
Well, thank you for providing these updates.
So I'll just say, so we were paying, or we had agreed to pay $54.79 per bed night to the Alliance under the previous contract, although we know that we did not receive, and these numbers in front of us demonstrate we didn't receive the 3,650 bed nights that we had contracted for.
So the previous year cost per bed night was calculated based on the utilization rate at the end of the contract, rather than being a predetermined cost, which is what's changed with this program year.
I'm just saying the contract called for 10 beds.
Right.
Over 365 days.
Yes,
And
and-
3,650 bed nights.
That's how that price is
So
calculated.
our contracted cost theoretically should have been $54.79. It was not in reality because of the fact that we didn't receive the 3,650 bed nights because a significant number of our people were turned away. So, but I do think it's relatively positive that we see, okay, we went from $110 to 77 to 90 to, I'm not sure the difference. I don't understand the difference between the average and the weighted average, but it looks like the cost have stayed relatively in line with what we were paying in the past. So I guess the question is, what do we had a minimum $15,000 upfront payment that we made at the beginning of this contract year?
That's correct.
Okay, so 15,000. So that's, okay, so you're saying we're out of money based on what the council has authorized.
Correct.
And if we want to have access to this, that we would need to authorize additional funds.
Well, I should note that the Alliance doesn't plan to no longer take in Vista residents. They just won't be charged to this contract.
Yeah, no,
The
I
Alliance
understand.
is committed to continuing to serve our community, yes.
But yeah, okay, so we should look at that. I mean, we've been, I think, the number one, investor as far as public agency. We put more in than any other. So I don't see. Do we have a representative of the Alliance?
Yes, we have two. We have Marilyn McCorkle and
So I thought I recognized you,
Mayor
Marilyn.
Hernandez, yep.
So we appreciate. We want to continue the partnership. I have a feeling that we'll need to continue to have access, and so I think we will want to probably have a larger conversation. Do you have any thoughts that you want to convey at this time about our contract relationship?
Yes, thank you.
for being here.
We have been happy to work with you. We are so thankful for the funding you've given us. I think what we're showing is We ran out, the 200,000 ran out after last year. We're at, I think, 350,000 at this point. And we will continue to help Vista residents. We would never have stopped. So I think it's a good partnership. I think I'd love to see, when we do the workshop, more details on who we're helping. We're helping a lot of families. The new Escondido Family Shelter has been helping a lot of the Vista families, as well as Operation Hope, which is right here in Vista. But we're helping a lot of Vista residents. So, and we'll continue to do that. We will not stop because the money stopped. We will continue to give reports and let you see exactly. I think the reports are pretty specific, and it has a lot of data. And I think once you see that, you'll get a better understanding of what we've been doing.
What's the latest on interfaith? So they had closed Haven House, and they were serving those people in the recuperative care center. And so the family shelter is now. Can you give us some update on the facilities at Interfaith? And
You know what? We have Erin Hernandez here, who is from Interfaith. I think she would probably do a better job of explaining.
That'd be
all
great.
that.
I'd love to hear about that. And I'm also curious to know if you know about La Posada, because they were talking about expanding their facilities there. I'm wondering if you might know that.
Yes, so thank you. For family shelter, we have been taking quite a few of referrals. Right now, we are at capacity. The majority of the families right now have come through our homeless outreach workers that come from PATH and from Exodus. So they are doing well. Families are progressing and getting employment and saving to be able to move on to housing. So that has been going very well, very positive interactions between our family shelter staff and our homeless outreach workers out here in Vesta. In regards to Haven House, so although Haven House is no longer at the 550 main office location, we are at a temporary location, which happens to be the recuperative care program. So at this time right now, there's allotted about 10 beds, and currently right now, those are filled by Vista residents. So we have recently housed somebody. We had a female who was housed who was Vista resident and moved on to housing just last week. So that has been positive. The individuals in the program have greatly benefited from being at this new location just because of the additional support that that location offers that unfortunately Haven House just could not offer financially. So that is what's going on right now for both of the programs.
Is there a plan in place, or a goal for Haven House? Is there a hope or a plan for it to reopen? What's the future of Haven House, do you think?
That's unknown. Funding sources, location is going to be very important. The facility, Haven House itself, we definitely want it to mirror what our recuperative care program looks like, because we've seen that the population that is coming into shelter, like Daniel has already mentioned, they're individuals who have a lot of health conditions, and the shelter setting is not made for that. It's a different type of demographic. So nothing in stone yet, but we are actively looking to be able to find a permanent location for Haven House. But again, right now it's just temporary where we are at the Turk Recuperative Care Center.
And that $108 is reflective of your cost to house somebody at the Turk Recuperative Center?
No.
But that's the cost that we've arrived at jointly in our contract.
So the services that are offered at the Turk Recuperative Care Center, you would in essence say that it is an hit the agency is taking in sense for being able to offer those additional things that Haven House itself as a program does not have the capability to offer financially within its budgets. So it would be a higher amount to do something like that.
I understand. Yeah. Thank you. I don't know if you know, or if you might know about La Posada and have any insight into their plans. I'm curious to know, because they were.
I don't, but yeah.
I know there's works in plan. I know there's going to be some construction. Let me find out about that, and I can report to Jonathan and let you know. I know it's going to take some time, but I do think that is the plan to expand, and even perhaps right now they can't bring in females, so I think they're having some plans to definitely expand, which will be helpful for the region.
Do you have any idea how much of this support, the $200,000, would have gone to Operation Hope here in Vista?
What we do is we take all the money we get from the cities and we divide it. We have a formula and we can share that with you. I don't have it exactly on, but yeah, I can let you know how much. And I think I've sent you.
Yeah, we do have that report, and I can follow up with the council or the committee, excuse me, with those details. But again, they will be discussed in greater length at the workshop, but I will provide that information ahead of that time.
Great. Last question, and I should have asked while you were at the podium, but how many beds are at the new family center? Thank you.
So depending on family configurations, it could be at minimum 36 beds. So for example, one of our rooms has what we call a twin full. So it's a full bed on the bottom and a twin on top. And on the other side, there's a twin bed. So depending on the family size, it could be one person or two people on the twin, one on top, one on the bottom, one person on the top for the twin full. And then at the bottom, depending on their family size, it could be two individuals or it could be one. So it'll range, but in essence, the structure is at minimum 36 beds. But it could be a little bit more if the family is a family of 5 and they can fit into that room.
Right.
May I ask a clarifying question? Would the individual family have their own room and no sharing amongst multiple families?
Yes, great question. So we do have rooms that are larger and they have within the capacity to be able for us to put in a divider to separate two families. If they are smaller families, and we do need to bring them in. The only thing about that is we have to be cautious with the configuration. We would not bring in a family that has a male within a family that's only female. For safety precautions, we just would not do that. So one example we have a mom and a child on one side, and then mom and a child on the other side. That configuration is possible because of safety precautions. So our larger rooms may have 2 families. Our smaller and medium-sized rooms most likely will just be the one family because the spacing.
Thank you for that
Yeah,
clarification.
for
I had a few questions for Mary Lynn, if I could take a moment. I appreciate you being here, and yes, thank you so much for the partnership through the Alliance. I am concerned about the decrease in positive exits to permanent housing. Would you be able to explain why that may have occurred?
I could offer a quick response if I may. So this is just data for a partial part of the reporting year. We should see additional successful exits once the contract is expired in September.
Okay.
So it may not be quite appropriate to compare the 3 from the current year from prior years because it covers a smaller period of time. Okay. And we have additional opportunities through September for more positive exits.
Unfortunately, we do see a decrease for the previous cycle as well, going from about 30% to down to 10%.
And I would like to come back, talk to the shelters. I don't work directly. I am sort of the funding, the person between the cities and the shelters. Aaron might have some reasoning for that, but there's also a lot of people that are still in the shelters. So while a lot of those numbers are probably still in the shelters. And I'd like to look and get kind of like do a deeper dive and maybe, pull up the numbers. But I think you said it was 3 successful.
Yeah, current year 3 so far, and the previous year, October 2020 through 2023, was 3 for the total year.
Because I'd like to look at those numbers again. I know, for instance, like some of the families, I believe they have been successfully exited going to families, and I just don't know what the like the definition of that would be. So like at the workshop, I'd like to be there and possibly have Aaron and really be able to do a deep dive on what's happening with the exits, because I think it will show a higher number for that. And I don't know, Aaron, if you have some words on that.
And I will just say I appreciate both of you being here to answer questions. The standing committee has the opportunity to bring in our partners with within our internal working group, right, and within our contracts to take a deeper dive. And during certain discussions based on what is listed on the agenda, we might be limited in how much we can take that deep dive, but I definitely would love to see our shelter providers participate in in a deeper discussion. So I appreciate any of the information that you have now, and I'm sure that we'll have ongoing conversations.
Yes, I would echo what Mary Lynn said. I would definitely want to look at the specific cases and what happened and what was going on with that, and do that dive into that to be able to see, okay, what happened? Was there something else, another opportunity for them? Was it behavioral? Was it motivation? What was it, right? So I would definitely want to go into that a little bit more, so we can look at the specifics and who we're actually talking about. I don't know that right now in this moment, but yeah, absolutely. I'm open to doing that.
Okay, I look forward to
Mm-hmm.
getting more information on that. Mayor Franklin.
And if we happen to know the, we hopefully we do statistically the average duration, that would be really important because we want to understand how people are utilizing the shelter. Are they there for a long period of time? Those would be. What I would say is, I still think it's really valuable for us to have access to the Alliance, but we would really we want to fix the problem, and we're frustrated because the problem's getting worse. Everything that's been done, we don't know if we're going, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, although it feels like we're going 1 step forward and 2 steps back. We don't know if we're even making a step forward. Or, my personal fear, what we're doing could be making the problem worse, right? We don't know. And, we've been asked by a lot of people to just trust that they know better than us. But yet the problem keeps getting worse. So it's very difficult for us as policymakers to trust without verifying. So what I'm saying is I'm just asking you to continue to partner with us in educating us. I know it takes away from your mission. And I understand when you have somebody in front of you and you want to help them, I understand how important that is. And I understand how fulfilling to the human spirit that is. That's amazing to have the opportunity to help people in that way. But we need you to take the time to educate us on what's going on, because we need to be able to communicate to the public that the right things are being done with their dollars so that we can continue to invest. But I just want to say, as we build our own shelter facility, obviously we're in competition for those dollars. So please continue to help us compete. I want you to compete with us because the competition will make us better. It'll demonstrate who can operate at the lowest, cost offering while providing services that are good services. We'll compete for who can provide the best outcomes at the most efficient costs. And I think that's totally a good thing. It's not it's a healthy competition. We can make each other better. But help us to understand the parts of the population that you're able to serve, that our operator is not able to serve, because I do know that you have some resource offerings we don't have, and I think those are very valuable. So I would just say thank you for the continued partnership. Thanks for helping us really get deep into, we're going to talk a little bit about this Escondido policy. I know you're very familiar with that. There's frustration. And it's because in years past, before this problem, overwhelmed governments locally, there wasn't a demand from policymakers to really deep dive into this, and service providers weren't sort of on the spot to explain. There was a lot of autonomy, and but now we're in a position we really need this information. The public wants to know. We have to be able to tell the public that we understand, and we have to be credible that we've done our deep enough dive that we really know what's going on. So thanks for helping us understand that stuff. The whole thought, to sum it up, is the more you invest in data, the more you can tell us what the outcomes are, the more attractive it's going to be for us to invest. But we really want the numbers. We want to know as much specificity as you can think of. If it was your money and you were investing it and you had the option to invest here or here, and you're here, why should we give the money here? What were total outcomes and total dollars invested? How do those two things, ultimately we're looking at cost per outcome. We want outcomes. Those are very valuable. We're willing to pay for the outcomes. They're positive outcomes. So we need to articulate what those are. Yep.
And I feel like we've been giving Jonathan a lot of information. So at the workshop, I would love to be a part of that and maybe give have shelter representation and really give you guys a deep dive, because I have been collecting a lot of information, more so than I ever have. So if we can, at that workshop, if we can share that with you and share, like I think we've given a lot of information. So I just think that needs to be presented to you, and I think you'll understand and be able to see kind of what we've been accomplishing this year.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And I definitely agree. And just one final clarifying question on this topic. When is the workshop for our strategic plan?
Thursday, June 6th.
If there's no more discussion on this item, then let us move forward to item 4, glossary of terms, presented by Program Manager Jonathan Lung. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you again. So included with the agenda packet would have been a glossary of terms. This is one of the first drafts that staff has compiled. It includes different standardized definitions, primarily from HUD, and staff kind of went through and decided which terms are used most often here within the context of Vista City Council. And so it is here presented for your feedback. We're happy to hear any inclusions you would like to see, maybe any exclusions or any kind of formatting comments you may have.
I did review them before the meeting, but our iPads don't have, or I was told that our iPads weren't updated with them. Do we have a physical copy? Thank you. Do you need one?
Yes.
Okay.
If you have a second one.
Okay, let's bring that up here, please. And if there's an issue with the iPads, maybe we can have all the documents printed before. Thank you.
The only thing I was going to suggest with regard to this particular item is because we've had a full agenda this morning, we still have a few things available. I first want to say thank you. I appreciate this. I've had a chance to read it, although I was hoping I could pull it up on my iPad this morning. I also got to say I went to the city's record-keeping system through the internet, and I went to standing committees, homelessness. The agenda is not posted in that. Oh, it's under current meetings. It's super confusing. Like, as I'm, as mayor and councilperson for 9 years now, it's why wouldn't it just automatically, why wouldn't we put it under why wouldn't we put it in both places? Does it change? Oh.
We take any of the materials that we receive during the public hearing and we put it into the report afterwards. So if we get handouts or comments or.
Okay, so I went to the wrong place. It's, we got a lot of records on our website, but it's not always easy to find what you're looking for. I don't know if there's a way to cross-link that back, or I don't know. I'm not trying to create extra work that's not necessary, but it'd be, I was sure I could find it and pull it up my iPad.
We will make sure
I wasn't
that
smart enough to do it, so.
you get it on your iPad or in hard copy form in the future.
That would be awesome. Anyway, I was just going to suggest, I think this is a working document that we're going to continue to refer back to. There's a lot of information on this. I think these things are going to become very important as we go through, particularly the data. So remind me, we're gonna do a workshop specifically on the data?
Well, the workshop will be inclusive of the entire strategic plan update, which will of course also include data from each strategy.
Remind me of the date.
Thursday, June 6th.
June 6th, okay. So I would just commit, I'll continue to review this. I think these definitions are gonna come in really one thing I would ask is, and I have asked this before, but I want to be really clear. I don't want the service providers to come up with the format for the report. I want you to come up with the format for the report because our service providers may change, and I want the same format for the report, period after period, so that we can have an apples to apples comparison of data sets. And I certainly would like you to coordinate, collaborate with our providers and get their input. But then after we've received their input, it would be my hope that the city dictates the template and we say, here are the blanks we want you to fill in. And certainly if they have additional information they want to provide on top of that, we want all the information that's relevant that we can get that, helps us understand what's going on. But then what I like is the terms that are used on that report to definitely appear on this glossary, and use as many words as you need to clearly explain what those terms are, so that we just know that 6 months later, the exact same word is the exact same meaning, and we're gonna see that every time we come back. And I don't think 6 months, we're doing 6 months or we're doing quarterly?
6 months.
Yeah, I'm not happy with that. I mean, honestly, I'd like the numbers monthly. I'd be more satisfied with them quarterly. Data is not fresh or as usable when it's that old. If it's 6 months old, we're getting it a month or two after the close of the period. We're working with data that's quite aged at that point. But more important than that, my bigger concern is that the people who are inputting the data can't remember specifics about it. Like I can remember what happened 3 months ago, for instance, in my business. I can remember who I wrote a check to or invoice. But if you ask me, did I pay something from 6 months ago? I can't remember. I got to go refer back to records, and that's the only thing I've got is the records at that point. So I just think more frequency, at least quarterly, since we've invested more time and money into this than probably any other thing. I think quarterly would be appropriate. Maybe we only have a big workshop meeting about it every 6 months, but I'd certainly like to see. And then to reiterate, I know that you're going to do this because we've had a lot of conversation about it. I'd like to see the template for the report before the service providers are told this is the final template. I think maybe this committee would want to review that template.
I have a suggestion there. So I'm recognizing that we have 2 standing committee meetings before our June workshop. I know that we're going to be talking about this in a little bit, that you're eager to talk about it, and I want to talk about it too. Maybe it's safety and enforcement, right? Dedicating our meeting in April or May to that. Maybe in May, we do a pre-review of our strategic plan update so that the template is everything that we're expecting so we can set staff up for success for that discussion. There's just so much to go over, Mayor, that I really do want to, I really appreciate you serving on this standing committee with me. I think that you and I have been having great conversations. It was awesome to do the ride along with you recently. I feel like we can easily get on the same page, but being able to have structured conversations allows us to take those deep dives. And I want to be cognizant of the timelines, not only of today, but as we're preparing for that June meeting, how much can we get accomplished in the standing committee beforehand? So I would also like to see those templates. I think that there's no reason why our standing committee can't review them. We absolutely should. And so I would be supportive of
Our attorney's
that.
getting nervous that we're off topic.
I'm just a little nervous again that we're.
Okay, we're going to go
beyond the
back
scope.
to the glossary of terms. I have one point of feedback. We don't have homelessness on here just as a term, right? We have chronically homeless, we have homeless street outreach, right? But there are multiple terms to describe, or multiple ways to describe homelessness. So within this glossary of terms, let's break that all down. And that would be, I think, one of my first assignments for you. But I completely agree, as we are updating our strategic plan, and I'll do my due diligence. I'll comb through the strategic plan. If there's terms in the strategic plan that are not in this glossary of terms, then I'm definitely going to highlight those and point them out to you, just so that we can have easy reference. I'm also terrible with acronyms, so it's the more I can study them and look at them, the easier it is for me to engage in conversations about this topic. So thoughts, Mayor, on the glossary of terms?
Yeah, I don't have any specific feedback other than I really appreciate seeing it. And the most specific feedback that I have is that the terms that will appear in our template will also appear in this glossary, because this has really been the thing, is getting the terms and descriptions of the data to align with the reports, because we've seen jargon in the reports, and that jargon has meant different things at different times. And I think when people are creating the report, they're creating the jargon to describe the thing they're reporting, and sometimes they're synthesizing a term. And, but putting that term here will give it some permanency. And are we really the only ones that are doing this? Nobody else has got?
There are various glossaries of terms, of course. This is specific for our uses.
Sure.
We've taken out some of the terms we don't generally encounter in these discussions.
Yeah, I would think this is really important. Certainly a great, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here, you know, that probably if you hadn't taken the time to define it, we might not even be aware of what it is. So it's a great learning document. I appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time. I know that was a big project, and I really appreciate you taking the time to create it and to taking the time to keep it updated and add terms to it as we go.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you. Next, we can move to D5, update from city attorney. If any members of the public wish to speak, please raise your hand, press 9, or submit a request to speak card. I don't think we've had any speakers as we've been moving along. Okay, great. So Beverly, thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Deputy Mayor. At the last standing committees, the committee directed staff to come back with different structures of different committees and how different options for this committee to structure itself, as well as a diagram detailing the new City of San Diego unlawful, I'm sorry, what is it called? The San Diego Unsafe Camping Ordinance. With respect to the different structures of committees that are at, that you have available to you, it's essentially how you see fit. I've looked at different cities, local cities around the area, and they have a similar structure such as this, two members of the council acting as appointed members. City of Encinitas also has a committee that has a council member as well as stakeholders and some community members. So it's essentially how the committee would like for it to be structured. If you were to change the structure of the committee, it'd have to go back to council for an organizational change. And after that, any nominations by the committee for any members would also have to go back to council for appointment.
Thank you, Beverly. I know that I had asked for that information. There wasn't anything in the agenda report. Would you be able to send us
Sure.
Materials on that so we can chew on it and potentially bring it back before the whole council?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any feedback I would have right now. I just wanted to see what our options were. So thank you for that. And any questions from you, Mayor, on that?
I just want to say that I think the format that we have right here, we've had the opportunity to hear from all of our service providers, every member of the community that wants to be heard. They can participate via Zoom. They don't even have to show up in our council chambers. We're willing to hear them. We're participating via Zoom right now, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So, you know, there's everybody who's involved in the conversation has had an opportunity to be heard here. I think it's been rather informal. I don't think we put anybody on the clock, which is great. I just think this works really well. And if we added 5 more people to this dais, we would definitely be here all day long. So I would like to keep it to the people's elected representatives. You know, and of course, reminder to the public, all 5 members of the council are either appointed to this committee or are ex officio members, and they are welcome to attend and to participate, but they're not required to do so. So I think, in my opinion, this is super inclusive. Nobody's been excluded. All the members of the public from around the world have an opportunity and a right to come and give input. So I'm really happy with the way we're doing it.
I think it's working, and I think my primary function as we're starting the standing committee is to evaluate and to essentially audit our strategic plan and our internal working group. And I do believe that stakeholder involvement can be key, especially when you're doing something innovative. We need to get the proper information first, but if there's an opportunity for us to bring in a stakeholder groups, even form a commission, right, that's purely advisory and doesn't have voting authority, I can see that being beneficial if we want to advance something new. And I have a vision of advancing things new in our city all the time. And I don't want to do that alone. I want to bring people along with me and confirm, right, that this is the right vision for us to pursue. But at this stage in our standing committee activities, I think we're taking a deep dive into the information. We're gaining new terms. We're putting the pieces together that I think are really important for us to evaluate. And I just think that the function of being able to take more time as council members and, you know, two leaders on the council that really care about homelessness, probably more than anybody, you know, we really, really drive home this topic. I think that we're taking the deep dive right now that we need to take. And it's already an exhaustive agenda, right? We don't need to add anything new. We're just evaluating what we already have in our strategic plan. And if we start with that, I'm pretty satisfied with that. So thank you for the information, Beverly. I'm not pushing for any particular changes right now. You know, if I was really motivated to expand community input on this side of the dais, I would absolutely do that. But I think that we have our hands full, frankly. So we'd love to hear on the other item related to the unsafe camping ordinance.
Great. If I could add just a final thought to that, my core concern is the individuals that would want to participate in a commission or be a member of this committee. Many of them are employed by or receive funding from the city or you know, other contracts, and I think there's a fundamental misalignment or a conflict of interest. I love to have them come here and give their information, but for them to be part of the either A, decision making, or B, the opining authority, I think is a misalignment. I think our function is to hold, you know, to review, audit, and hold accountable those individuals that are, you know, implementing the programs. That's why I'm so convinced that this is the right makeup, the way we're doing it.
Understood.
Okay, so I have diagrammed the City of San Diego's new ordinance concerning the encampments on public property. It is on your screen, and I also have hard copies. So essentially, this is their unlawful camping ordinance as it stands. They have added to their, or amended their municipal code to add protection of waterways and unlawful encampments, the enforcement of it, and the abatement process. It mostly mirrors the City of San Diego's, the City of Vista's ordinance, with the exception of this, if you look on item number 2 under unauthorized encampments, it adds unlawful activity and citable, enforceable activity regardless of shelter. Whereas under our ordinance, we say we don't codify that. We codify that it's unlawful to camp on public property. They specifically set out areas within the City of San Diego that they cannot camp, and specifically it's within 2 blocks of the school or of a shelter, in any open space or waterway or any park that the city manager deems to be a substantial public health and safety risk. Enforcements are pretty much the same, except they have a caveat that they can't do it between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. when the person's on public property. And their abatement procedure is codified. And their protection of waterways section, we have something similar in the developmental code. So they just encompassed everything into one ordinance.
I want to point out one particular item that's interesting to me. Under enforcement, it says, except as otherwise indicated, shall not issue a criminal citation between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5:30 a.m. or when the person is on public property at a time when no shelter is reasonably present or reasonably available. And so how does that differ from the second item where you said that shelter availability is not a factor? Because it looks like enforcement is still conditional under shelter being available.
So everything under section 1, the second prong, number 1, can only be enforced if there is shelter available and they deny it.
Okay.
Under number 2, it doesn't matter whether or not shelter is available. However, enforcement of enforcement of criminal citations is, there is a gap between 9 p.m. and 5:30 a.m. that they cannot enforce this unlawful, under section 2, 2 and 3.
I will also say that this was not included in the agenda items, and this is the first time I'm seeing it, so I'm being forced to read through it in the moment, so it is a little bit difficult for me to speak on the topic immediately, and I'm gathering my questions, but Mayor, if you have current questions, please.
Definitely. Okay, so you're saying that under the, do you have a printed copy of the
Yes.
current Vista Municipal Ordinance?
Yes.
So does Vista Municipal Ordinance currently make it unlawful to camp or maintain an encampment where such activities pose an immediate threat or unreasonable risk or harm to a person?
Not specifically codified in the section, no, it's public property. It's listed as public property, and I have a chart for the Vista Municipal Code as well.
Thank you.
So if we were to adopt an ordinance that made it unlawful to camp or maintain an encampment where such activity poses an immediate threat or unreasonable risk of harm to a person, that would add new, that would expand and add new authority?
Yes.
Okay, and also for immediate threat, unreasonable risk, harm, to public safety, health, or disruption to vital government services?
Yes.
Okay. And would it be adding something new to the Vista Municipal Code to make it unlawful to camp or maintain a camp within 2 blocks of a school?
Yes.
Okay, within 2 blocks of any shelter?
Yes. All of these prongs would be additions to the Vista Municipal Code.
Okay.
And this is specific to, this is detailed and highlighted because it's regardless, enforcement is regardless of whether or not shelter is available.
Right. Our ordinance is just presently silent on the issue because it really hasn't been updated since Martin v. Boise was decided.
Correct.
Right. So I want to make clear that I asked our city attorney, Walter Chung, when this was first adopted, and it's subsequently something similar was adopted by the city of Poway, that I did ask him to review this ordinance, and I want to make clear that he came back and told me that there was no substantial difference in the authorities granted to law enforcement by the Vista Municipal Code and this. Now, this is a much more detailed analysis, and I appreciate this. This is what we needed. So what I'm hearing you say potentially is that we could already cite on public property. Can we cite for a threat to risk of unreasonable threat or unreasonable risk of harm to a person?
So if they're maintaining a camp in a public place, we can cite so long as we offer shelter. What this code is saying is that if there is no shelter,
right?
I mean, if there is no shelter and they are doing this,
right,
then you can cite.
Okay, so that we cannot currently do because our municipal code doesn't allow for that.
Our municipal code calls for, it doesn't address it. It's silent on the issue. It doesn't.
So this constitutes an update that's relevant to Martin v. Boise. It gives powers that we don't presently have.
Yes.
Okay, so I certainly would want, and I would ask that we agendize for the city council to bring this language forward so that we can make it unlawful, regardless of the availability of shelter, to camp where it provides, where it poses an immediate threat or unreasonable risk of harm to persons, unreasonable risk of harm to public safety, disruption of vital government services, to camp within 2 blocks of a school or a shelter, all these things that are listed here, within a waterway, within a transit hub, trolley platform, trolley tracks, any park that the city manager determines there is and I wouldn't say any park that the city manager determines there's a substantial public health or safety risk. E should just be any public park. We should have an absolute zero tolerance for people camping in our parks. Our parks are not for residing in, they're for our children to play in. They're for our families to recreate in. That's something that I think is not negotiable. Because when I go to Wildwood Park and there are people strung out on drugs, passed out, and there's kids playing 100 feet away, that is completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. So yeah, I'd like to see us and would direct staff to agendize for a future council meeting any authorities that are not presently available to the City of Vista that are contained within this legislation.
Are you asking to agendize it for discussion amongst council, or are you asking us to bring it back as a recommendation to the council to adopt a new ordinance?
Perhaps if the deputy mayor is in agreement, then it might be a staff recommendation. I mean, I certainly would want to discuss it and have the council direct staff to prepare an ordinance to be brought back and formally adopted. We're in new territory with a subcommittee. Perhaps if we're in agreement, staff might want to move more expeditiously with the process. I certainly would think that would be great. Again, a little uncharted territory, but
Certainly.
Deputy Mayor, what do you think?
I wouldn't be in a position to support an update to our municipal code at this time for a couple of reasons. I think I have a question as to how we define a threat, and what that means legally. I also want to know the current status of Martin v. Boise and its potential to be changed. I know that there are potentially hearings that this summer that may impact that. So I think that that is something for us to consider. The park conversation I think is interesting. I really advocate for the appropriate use of public spaces, and I tend to value not so much deterrence of bad behavior, but the positive activation of a space. And in the recovery world, that can be defined by pro-social behaviors, right? And the more positive public use we have of our public spaces, the better they are for everyone, the more appropriately they're used. And I think that when it comes to children, they are a really great benchmark for how we define if a space is safe or accessible or not. And when we orient our spaces around children and families, and we ensure that they're safe for children and families, they're generally safer for the whole community. I think that that can occur with or without enforcement, that we can enhance our public spaces to be healthy and good for children and families without requiring enforcement. So when I think about the challenges that people who are sleeping outside face to find a reasonable place to lay their head, it's nothing's a good option. As we learned earlier, these are not places that are meant to be habited by a person. And so is our goal in an update to our ordinance to remove someone from a place that they're not meant to inhabitate, right? But yet they have no alternative, or the alternative is just pushing them down the road. That's one of the biggest conflicts that I see with an anti-encampment policy like this is, yeah, maybe we'll have greater enforcement in some neighborhoods and they'll get quote unquote cleaned up, but then they just push it right down the road. I see that happen in my neighborhoods frequently, right? There might be There have been instances where there's encampments and it's on private property, right? And those encampments are disbanded and then they move further down the road to another property. So I'm just challenging this to say, I don't know if this resolves the problem, which is houselessness. And at the same time, I do recognize the importance of the proper use of public spaces and safety and consideration of our community in that way. I understand that that's a concern. So I would absolutely entertain hearing it. And I think with an ordinance update like this, it's absolutely essential for the entire council to hear it and have a discussion. So I would support you in bringing it forward, Mayor, but I have some questions that I would absolutely need answered before I would update our municipal code. And to even just support staff's, efforts on this, or to support, you leading a discussion on this, I would say I would really like to know what the status of Martin B. Boise is, and what does enforcement look like? And what could the impacts be of are we just moving things down the road? Or is this resolving the problem? I think that we are offering shelter, and that's a huge point to make with this. Clearly, we are offering shelter. Will it ever be adequate? That's another question. Will our shelter offerings ever be adequate to meet the need of people who are impoverished and without homes in our community? I am not sure. So at this time, I wouldn't provide direction as a standing committee member, but I would absolutely continue to entertain this conversation. I think it's an important one to have.
So I understand your direction there. So it sounds like bring it as a discussion item at my request. And I just can't reiterate enough that our parks have to be for the kids and the families, and there has to be zero tolerance. I have personally no tolerance level whatsoever for people who are strung out and passed out on drugs, laying 50 feet away from where the kids swing in our parks. It's extremely upsetting. It makes me very angry, and it's just this council cannot tolerate it.
Also, to provide further, support of the discussion, Mayor, it would be good for us to workshop this idea and be able to identify what does an encampment really mean, because I'm a big user of the parks. I like to throw a blanket down and lay out in the sun and enjoy our recreational facilities. My concern is, people use our parks who are homeless. And sometimes there are encampments that are established, and then sometimes people are just passing through. And maybe it's unsightly, right? But I like to use the parks just like anyone, and I would be concerned about unfair targeting of people. So if there's maybe some way we can specifically define an encampment to assure that as people who are using the parks out of, regardless of their socioeconomic status, right? My concern is that if someone is laying out in the park and they look like they're part of a homeless encampment, but they're really just using the parks, I wouldn't want us to unfairly punish those people. That's a challenge that I would have, but if we're able to identify what an encampment is and where the harm starts to occur, then I can see us actually having a viable enforcement for that.
Personally, I'd be in favor of banning all sleeping in the parks.
Man, you never take a nap under the sun?
If I have to ban sleeping in the parks to make it clear that I don't care if you're sunbathing and enjoying the sun or you're sleeping there because you're passed out on meth, I'm more than happy to say, hey, if you're enjoying the park and you're awake, great. That's just for me. But I'm more than happy to ban sleeping in the parks if that's what's necessary to make clear that it's not okay to sleep as a heroin addict, strung out in front of our children.
Madam Chair, if I may just add or advise you that the Vista Municipal Code currently does define camping under subsection A. It's the use of the public property for living accommodations. So
Living accommodations.
living accommodations is the key term, I believe.
So
in
that could be
that
like,
definition.
because there's a nearby restroom facility, people are sleeping is a type of a living accommodation. Like, that's really interesting to deep dive into that. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Like I said, I absolutely entertain a continued discussion on this, you know, but I, as a member of the public as well, who I move throughout the public, I can see certain challenges with these updates, but I think that there's probably some areas where I can be understanding within 2 blocks of any shelter, especially when we're offering shelter. I think that that makes reasonable sense, right? So I can be challenged in restricting people's liberty to be able to move throughout the community. But I think that there's questions I have about how are we defining a threat, right? Making sure that that's clear and enforceable. And what does it look to utilize our public facilities for living amenities, right? Really being able to define that. Because what I don't want to do is put something forward that's just going to kind of move the problem in a circular fashion. I think we're even seeing that in San Diego. I've seen complaints from residents of San Diego that say, oh, well, it's, you know, great for their block, right? But it's just moving down to my block, and I wouldn't be satisfied with that.
Question would be, we got to this part and we got into a discussion about enforcement. Going back to the San Diego ordinance, I wanted to make sure we heard all of your analysis on this in terms of what other powers this granted to the city of San Diego that the Vista Municipal Code doesn't currently authorize.
The only thing that I would say with this, the second column would be number 2 and number 3 are the ones that are not spoken to in our ordinance. And as far as the enforcement piece, when we say cannot enforce between 9 p.m. and 5:30 a.m., and when shelter is reasonably available, like those are your prongs for enforcement for this particular ordinance. But except as otherwise indicated, meaning regardless of shelter, that section, it does not apply.
So with regard to enforcement, I do not support a prohibition on enforcement during any particular times. So I wouldn't be bringing that element of the San Diego ordinance forward.
That was for purposes of a settlement agreement that they were dealing with.
Okay, and since we're not subject to the terms of that settlement agreement, I wouldn't support that. And I would not support including language about non-enforcement when shelter is not available, because that's already, right now, that's judicial precedent in the Ninth Circuit Court that I hope will be overturned by the Supreme Court soon. So I would not want to codify that in our municipal code, because I hope that soon we'll be, we're bound by it right now until the Supreme Court acts or until they don't. So I would not want to codify that in my proposal. And what about abatement here? Is there anything here that, I see we're saying minimum 24-hour notice. I want to discuss going to 3-hour notice. I know that was done for a time period in the city of San Diego. And I'd like to get to the point where we say, look, you know, you give somebody 24-hour notice, they're going to move in a day to the other side of the street, and then you start the clock again. It needs to be 3 hours where we show up and we say, we've got a shelter bed available. We would like to take you there. Here's a picture of it. Here's a brochure, shows how beautiful it is. Here's the nice people that are going to help you, the services we're going to offer, the things that we can do, connect you with services. If you don't want to accept that generous offer of help, then you've got 3 hours to make a decision about whether or not you want to leave this area or you're going to be arrested. And then I think we should come in and we should collect, according to law, we're required to provide storage for their items if they can't remove them. But allowing people to set up encampments and have 24 hours is an unreasonable burden to efficient and successful enforcement. So I'd like us to pursue that 3-hour number.
There may be an issue or a challenge with respect to notice and due process for giving a 3-hour mark. 24 hours, I believe that was the number given for the city of San Diego because it was enough time if an individual walked away from their property for them to come and see the posted notice sign and have enough time to be on notice of such a cleanup.
Well, I know that the city of San Diego was sued, and I don't remember the specific allegations in the suit. Perhaps we will have to use that as a guidepost to make sure that we don't run afoul of the specific legal concepts that were called out, that the city of San Diego is now subject to some kind of enjoinder because of that settlement. So we have sort of a roadmap of what we can and cannot do. And that's what I'm asking our legal staff to do is bring that back. Let's review it together, that settlement agreement. Let's get the court decision. And let's use that as a roadmap to suggest the policy to the council. But it makes no sense to me, somebody who sits their belongings down at 9 in the morning and we show up and tell them they've got until 9 a.m. the next morning. They are trespassing, they are breaking the law. 3 hours is a very reasonable time, particularly given the fact that we are willing to store their items for them. We are willing to move their items at our expense and our effort and store them securely for 90 days. We are providing reasonable accommodation for the person that cannot move their own items, but our public, our residents should not have to tolerate somebody being there for 24 hours, particularly when somebody is believed not to have been there for 24 hours. If somebody's been in an encampment for, they've established some kind of a right of tenancy under the law. I don't even know if that's a thing. It might be for people living in an encampment. But if I set my stuff down 2 minutes ago and now I have the right to be there for 24 hours, that's absurd. That's absurd. I shouldn't need 24 hours notice to get my stuff that I sat down 2 minutes ago and leave, right? So I really want to press the 3-hour issue. I think we need to get people moving and let them know that Vista's not a place we're going to tolerate you building an encampment, period. As long as we've got shelter available for you, or we can do a motel voucher, we're not going to put up with people building encampments on our streets, in our parks, next to our schools, in our transit facilities. I promised the people of Vista that we would be a safer and a cleaner city, and our residents of every stripe and color, every age and condition, every ideological conviction do not want these encampments on their streets, in their parks, next to their schools. So I think it's incumbent upon us to take action swiftly, make sure that we're all aligned in our thinking here.
Thank you. I think that there's an opportunity to define something that could lead to a valuable discussion. I do want to clarify, in this circumstance, from a legal perspective, would that be considered trespassing? Or would it be a violation of the city's?
It would be a violation of the city ordinance.
Okay, I'm learning a little bit more about trespassing today, so I appreciate that. Okay, well, I look forward to your work on this, Mayor, and to being able to have ongoing discussions. If there's not any more comments, I will move us along to D6.
The last comment is just to reiterate, not to Beverly, who's here, but to our city attorney directly. I'm not happy because I did ask for a review to be conducted, and I really wish that it had been this level of specificity, because I was instructed that there was no authority that was granted in that ordinance. So, you know, I need to put that on the record. I'm not happy about that because the response to my inquiry being inaccurate deprived me of the opportunity to take action as a policymaker. I would have brought this to council months ago if I'd have thought that there were additional authorities granted therein. So I need, when we ask those questions, the review has to be thorough and thoughtful.
It takes a long time for us to, you know, build consensus and come to a solution that I think works for our community as a whole. So I do appreciate when staff can act swiftly on some of the requests for information that we've provided. I also was curious, where is Walter today? Is he remote or is he not attending this meeting?
He's working remotely. It was agreed that I would staff the meeting from the attorney's office.
Okay, thank you for that. Now we can move along to D6. This is going to be our general homelessness updates. Please provide any additional update staff. And then Mayor and I will have the opportunity to discuss other activities related to the city's strategic plan to address homelessness. This is kind of like an open-ended, you know, discussion. Maybe we'll be able to come to agreement on some items today. Maybe we'll be able to provide direction for future meetings, but would love to hear updates from staff first. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. There's just one update that staff was asked to bring to the committee for some thoughts, and that is the policy statement that the City of Escondido had published recently. There are just a few thoughts I'd like to point out that may prompt some discussion from the committee members. First is that they have stated that they are taking a public safety first approach. This, of course, is in direct conflict with the housing first approach that is required for a lot of the state and federal funding sources for grants that seek to address homeless services. The policy statement also attributes the vast majority of unhoused to being addicted to drugs, experiencing a mental health crisis, or both. And the statement goes so far as to say that sobriety is the only acceptable option. For those who do meet that criteria and have not chosen sobriety, they are labeled as criminal transients, which the policy statement says adversely impacts businesses and residents on private property. The other point that I wanted to point out is that the statement calls for a Escondido first approach, which prioritizes unsheltered individuals with direct ties to Escondido. The statement does not describe how that direct tie to Escondido will be determined, but it also says that local resources should be reserved for local need only, and that those local resources cannot be a regional resource. So that's the extent of staff's comments for the committee's consideration.
Thank you. I have several thoughts on this. I would love to hear from the mayor to start. But generally, I think that we have consensus on our council that our goal is to make homelessness a brief, one-time occurrence, and that as long as we are successfully and effectively exiting people into positive and stable housing options, that there are other challenges, whether that be a substance use disorder, mental health, family crisis, are adjacent to their challenge of homelessness, but our services are aiming to provide physical shelter and stability, and then with the goal of long-term permanent housing. And the way that you accomplish that may very well be through sobriety. I'm a huge advocate of sobriety. I experienced sobriety in my own life. I know it takes a lot of motivation to change, and having your basic needs met is really important factor to being able to successfully recover from any challenge, whether that be a substance use disorder or homelessness itself. So I think that this is, I think, a step backward. I do think that we need to continue to evolve our services to be more effective and utilize enforcement measures that are reasonable and with greater public safety in mind. But I think that this would jeopardize a lot of the programs we already have in place, which, as we heard today, have already shown great success. And so I would be concerned that we would be taking a step back only to step away from programs that are ultimately very effective. I also have just disagreement with some of the statements. This idea that homelessness and housing affordability are not intertwined, that is definitely not the case. With higher rates of rent and higher rates of eviction, we know that the next step is homelessness for many people. And I think it's interesting that they include a exception for homeless seniors, right, or those on a fixed income. I think that they're so close to understanding the fact that poverty and the ability to meet your basic housing needs is a struggle for people, and it's a slippery slope. I also think mental and behavioral health is ignored in this, and what comes first, right? The behavioral health issues or the traumatic experiences that families can often face. I do want to share a personal experience that I had this week that I think is really relevant to policies related to behavioral health, which this is a behavioral health policy. For a group of decision makers in Escondido to say, this is what our take on substance abuse and behavioral health is going to be. I do not know what expertise they used for that, but they're taking a specific stance on behavioral health, and they're referring it to it as a safety issue and as an issue that affects their commercial centers and affects the general community, which is true. This week I experienced trespassing in my own home, and the person who was trespassing was a neighbor who I had known for a very, very long time. And the series of events that resulted in this criminal activity, it's like I was seeing someone fall into madness right in front of my eyes. This was a person who has a family, who also has disabilities, is legally blind, and who was isolated and who started to slip into a mental and behavioral health crisis. I first encountered him, a couple days before the trespassing incident, and he was kind of talking funny to me, right? He wasn't acting normal. When someone's not acting normal, you start to get a little scared because what's going on? And over the next couple of days, the behavior started to get more erratic. He was expressing himself kind of on the property and was saying things loudly and shouting and basically having just inappropriate behavioral health expressions, right? That's like not a normal, healthy expression. He wandered into my yard, and I had to confront him and say, you are trespassing. When you come in to the yard without being invited, that is trespassing, and I need you to know that because I am going to have to enforce that. I need to make sure that I'm safe, and I don't want to have to worry about who comes towards my home. But then he sat on the ground, right, and he's sitting on the ground, right, and in an effort to subdue the situation, I sit down on the ground with him, and I'm asking him what's going on, and he's clearly going through something. I end up trying to get him some help. He wasn't receptive. He eventually, after a couple of nights of extreme behavioral health outbursts, he wandered off. Again, he's legally blind, and he ended up getting injured potentially even hit by a car. We're not sure what happened to him. And I really wish that the sergeant and deputy were still here. And I did speak to our sheriff's captain about this because the deputies were extremely helpful in this situation. Deputy Takeda and Deputy King and others, they were extremely kind, and they followed every protocol that they were supposed to follow. They met with him at one point at around 7 p.m., and they cleared him from a psychological and physical threat perspective, not a harm to himself or others. He said he didn't want to hurt himself, but 3 hours later, he walked into traffic. And that is baffling to me. And so our deputies didn't do anything wrong, right? But our procedures for how we deal with mental, behavioral, and family crises in our neighborhoods is not meeting people where they're at. So I was really struck by that. I've been having terrible dreams about it. It's absolutely broken my heart. I'm glad he's alive, but I don't know what his mental state is. But I know it's not drugs also. I know it's not drugs. He went into a place that no one ever wants to go into with his mental health. And, Mayor, I heard your talk yesterday at the Rotary Club. I thought it was very passionate, and some of the things you said about how do we prove that we're a compassionate society, I think really struck me, and that we don't have to continue to blame generations that came before us 40 years ago of what they failed and what they did wrong to address mental health. But having spoken to Dr. Bergman with the county, one of the things that he said to me that really sticks with me is that responding to mental and behavioral health, it can't just be in a crisis situation. It has to be in the day-to-day, in our family lives and in our neighborhood interactions. We need to come up with a better solution than what we have. And I don't think that this public safety approach is it. I don't think it actually reaches into the family and reaches into the neighborhood and says, we care about your mental well-being and the safety of yourself and others in a way that is substantial to actually heal people. I think that there are other countries that are more advanced than us in their behavioral health response, that people have more access to resources. And unfortunately, my neighbor, by the time he really needed those resources, he wasn't in the state of mind to receive them. But how do we prevent? How do we connect with people before they completely lose it? This policy is about enforcement at the worst possible moment. And I think it's a poor use of our energy. I would rather us focus on preventing crises in our neighborhoods and in our families. And I think that the exception that they're providing about low-income seniors, I think that the exception is actually much broader than that. The exception of people who lose their housing due to challenges with income and their economic status is actually much greater than it's being acknowledged in this policy. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Mr. Long, I don't agree with what you said, because the statement says that the public recognizes that there's a pervasive level of and consistent level of criminal activity that exists with the unhoused population. But it also very clearly says that this City of Escondido recognizes that not everyone experiencing homelessness is a criminal transient. In other words, particularly with those people who are chronically homeless, there's public urination, public defecation, there's trespassing, there's illegal camping, there's theft. There are a large litany of violations that are taking place almost all the behaviors of living outside in an illegal way, separate from the fact that it's illegal to live outside, the associated behaviors of littering, polluting with bodily fluids, these things are all criminal. The shoplifting and other crimes that accompany it are all illegal. So, in fact, it is a pervasive and consistent level of criminal activity. I want to ask members of the public to go out and Google for the City of Escondido policy. I'm gonna ask the city clerk to include this in the attached materials so that everyone can read it. This is exactly 2 pages long. It's a very short read. And I'm gonna just give the top line of every paragraph because each one is a statement of values. I just wanna start off by saying I think this is an excellent statement. I think the statement recognizes the will of well in excess of 75% of the general public. It starts off by saying that homelessness is a complex issue without a single solution. I think we all agree with that. It says we understand there are a number of underlying causes, including housing affordability, mental health concerns, and substance abuse disorder. I think we all agree with that. It says the City of Escondido is committed to a compassionate, needs-driven approach for families and individuals experiencing homelessness that are willing to receive help. I think we all agree with that. It says Escondido has led the response to homelessness in North County by partnering with residents, business owners, and Vista has also been a leader, no question. It says that their city has listened to the public, and it does find that there is a pervasive and consistent level of criminal activity associated with the unhoused population. It says this is largely perpetuated by those with substance abuse disorder. It says that to ignore this reality and to primarily attribute homelessness to housing availability and affordability is naive. This statement is true, and I agree with it strongly. This is a core fissure in the homelessness industrial complex and the narrative, the false narrative that they advance, that housing affordability is the primary driver, when we can see with our own eyes that the individuals who are living in chronic homelessness on our streets almost universally suffer from substance abuse disorder, and a large number of them have co-occurring mental health disorders. I would remind you that the American Psychiatric Association defines substance abuse disorder as a mental disorder. So in a way of thinking about it, they are all suffering from some kind of mental disorder. The choice to live unhoused when confronted with the alternative to live in a beautiful place like our new Buena Creek Navigation Center evidences a mental unwellness, an illness, a disorder, because it is not in the best interest of the individual to live on the street when they could live in as beautiful a place as we have seen fit to provide in the city of Vista. This document says that the city of Escondido believes everyone should be treated with dignity and respect, irrespective of their current situation and economic status. I think we all agree with that. It says the city of Escondido will not support any program that enables continued drug use or individuals to continue living on the street. I don't think that we all agree with that, but I do. I think that the vast majority, I think 70 or 80% of the people in Vista agree with that statement. The words harm reduction have been used, and my understanding of harm reduction, and I would invite anybody to Google the term harm reduction, is that it is an approach that begins with tolerating drug use and trying to ameliorate the effects of drug use. The reality is the only salvation medically, physically, emotionally, and spiritually for the person is to free themselves of their addiction to drugs. That we have difficulty all agreeing to that fact is deeply troubling to me. I frankly don't understand their Housing First statement and how that relates to seniors being priced out because, but I agree when they say that the one-size-fits-all approach of Housing First, they say it's proven ineffective with regard to seniors. But what I would say about Housing First, as I have said oftentimes, is that a sober mother and children deserve a sober place to live. It is wrong, immoral, unrighteous, unjust that an individual who has suffered from a heroin addiction and has now been sober for 6 months does not have the right to live in a place that is sober by choice that receives funding from the state or the federal government. That is unjust, it is wrong, it is immoral. A mother who suffers homelessness and who wants to house her children in a sober facility should have the right to do that. It is wrong. And so I point that out. That is what I believe. It is wrong that the Housing First policy, which requires a blind eye to substance abuse for all program participants and denies all state and federal funding under a state law and a federal law, denies all funding for those projects that are sober and ignores the need for housing for seniors and children and recovering addicts. I think that's wrong, and I think the city of Escondido is right to call out that that's wrong. It reiterates the point about data showing that the vast majority of the unhoused are either addicted to drugs or experiencing mental crisis. We talked about that. I'm not going to belabor that point. It goes on, as I've already said, to say clearly that not everyone experiencing homelessness is a criminal. It says they stand ready and willing to lend immediate support to those who are willing to accept help. At least I think we can agree to both of those statements. Not everyone who's homeless is a criminal, and we stand willing to help them. I think we agree with that, all of us. It goes on page 2. It says the city of Escondido understands that criminal transients adversely impact local businesses and suppress economic development. When the people on Main Street that sell me flowers for my wife on Valentine's Day stop me in the middle of buying roses for my wife to ask me if I could please help them clean up the feces from the alleyway behind their business. We discussed it a moment ago with regard to the no trespass signs. Clearly, criminal transient trespassing and homelessness in our downtown and other parts of our city are negatively affecting the ability of our families to go grocery shopping, to enjoy our businesses. They are negatively impacting our economic development. I think we can all agree on that statement. It says the city of Escondido recognizes the detrimental impacts that criminal transients have on our parks, our creeks, our waterways, our plazas, and other public buildings. I've voiced my opinion that our parks should be a zero-tolerance area for people who are living and should be reserved only for our families and people and children and people who are recreating. When I first walked into the Hacienda Creek waterway, I don't know, some 5-6 years ago, and saw an enormous quantity of trash that was piled up in the creek bed in an area that has been designated as a sensitive environmental set-aside and is riparian habitat, and which our environmental community has fought so hard to set aside and to keep as pristine for a very endangered set of species. When I saw the devastation and environmental destruction that comes with these illegal encampments, I think we can all agree that that statement is true. The evidence is as plain as the nose on the end of our faces. It says the city of Escondido believes that local control is critical. I certainly believe that. I don't think that one size fits all. Actually, the statement before that, I didn't mean to skip. It says the city of Escondido understands that changes in state law have removed any viable mechanism to force an individual experiencing homelessness to accept help. I don't know that I necessarily fully agree that it has completely removed any viable mechanism. My opinion is that we do not have the political will to utilize those mechanisms available to us. We presently have 380 individuals exactly who are in a conservatorship, and we have 3.3 million people in the county. We have 11,000 people unhoused in the county living chronically homeless. Clearly, you know, we had as many as 1,200 people or more in conservatorship. We have de-emphasized the use of conservatorship because it is not politically popular. However, conservatorship to be implemented can only be implemented by the unanimous verdict of a jury with the right of counsel for one's defense. Those are two rights that are guaranteed in the United States Constitution. Under California law, the right to a patient's right advocate and to a psychiatrist's medical diagnosis are both protected. So after we've done all of those things to protect the rights of somebody who is suffering from a mental break and is a harm to themselves, I do not believe it's abridging somebody's rights if they've demonstrated to a unanimous jury of 12 that they are a harm to themselves. And we need to utilize the conservatorship option to help these individuals, not for all 11,000 in our county, but for a small subset, larger than the subset that's currently receiving those services. So I think there's a lot of political will, and I think if we elect leaders who voice the importance of using involuntary treatment for those who are too sick to know that they are sick and who would benefit from treatment and who are a harm to themselves, then I think we'd all be further ahead. And I think most beneficial would be to those individuals suffering from mental illness. They would benefit the most, and it would be most morally righteous to help them. It says that the city of Escondido recognizes the role that law enforcement plays with respect to homelessness and that it's limited and specific. That sounds fair enough. City of Escondido advocates for programs to reduce the prevalence of drug addiction. That sounds great to me. I'm against drug addiction. It says that they support programs to provide mental health support to achieve independence. It says they seek to provide education and intervention efforts, especially for our youth. That sounds great. I'm all for that. It says the city of Escondido supports an Escondido first approach that prioritizes individuals in our community with direct ties to Escondido. Now, I was in Escondido yesterday talking to a group of people, and I was there with my friend Councilman Joe Garcia. And the way he explained that, and perhaps the city of Escondido will have to go back and redefine this if they haven't given it clear context. And what I think is great is this is not an ordinance. This is a policy statement. So it doesn't have a specific binding effect. If they want it to have a specific and binding effect, they'll have to come back and give it more shape. I agree with and I support the people of Escondido saying enough of bringing people from the city of San Diego and leaving them on our doorstep when they won't accept or won't positively pursue treatment. Nobody is showing up after somebody's been delivered to interfaith. Nobody is offering that person a ride back to the place where they were found. So Escondido has suffered while people have been left to languish in their community, and that's not fair or right. And I spoke to Mayor White in Escondido, and I said, you know, there are a lot of cities who have not been good actors, who have not done their fair share. I said, Vista has done its fair share, and we should be able to partner cooperatively and regionally amongst those cities who have done their fair share, and we should incentivize cities to serve their specific population. Because the reality is, we want to serve Vistans in Vista, and we want to serve Oceanside residents in Oceanside. Every community should provide the resources needed to serve their own population, and no community should be imposed upon to tackle more of this extremely vexing problem than their own population would dictate. So the people of Escondido and the people of Vista both want to know that we are not going to have a policy in the city of Vista that is going to import criminal conduct, that is not going to import illegal encampments, that is not going to import people who have significant challenges of mental health and substance abuse disorder. I think that's a completely fair statement. I understand maybe some here don't agree with that. I believe the vast majority of the people of Vista do agree with that, and I will bring that policy, and I will fight for that, and we can have that debate as a council, because I think that that is incredibly important. And as we talk about the Navigation Center resources that we have offered, and we have this 3-year partnership with the city of Escondido, and with Encinitas rather, and we appreciate the partnership. As we've seen today, they have certain ideas about being able to drop people off around the clock that maybe we agree with, maybe we don't. I think there's challenges there. And I think ultimately long-term, as we've set aside $4.5 million to replace the facility that we have now with a new program in 3 years, I think that it should be the goal of the city of Vista to operate autonomously, and it should be the goal of the city of Encinitas to stand up a shelter in the city of Encinitas, where it may not be popular for them to do so, but I think the people in this room will agree. I know Greg Anglio would agree, because he stood here and told me that the shelters needed to be in the cities where they are serving the population. So I know that Greg would forcefully, if he were here, advocate that the city of Encinitas should have a shelter in the city of Encinitas to serve their population. So actually, if we simply look at this from maybe a slightly different perspective, we might just all agree on what this really means. And so what Councilman Joe Garcia was saying yesterday, he said, if you've ever had a job in Escondido, if you've ever lived in Escondido, if you have family in Escondido, if you've got some, any kind of tie, any describable connection to their city, he said they don't want to refuse you. But if you can't articulate any connection whatsoever of any kind to that city, what they are saying is what I heard Councilman Garcia say, and I think he's right. They have done more than their fair share. They have lifted more than their fair share. And I think Vista's in the same position. And I think it's right and just that we should say, demonstrate some connection whatsoever in any way to the city of Vista. I think that's entirely reasonable, lest we put ourselves in a position. My fear is we've created 48 beds at the Buena Creek Nav Center. What's going to happen is people are going to step foot from the Oceanside line into the Vista, or from Poway into Vista or San Marcos or wherever they come from. Maybe the city of San Diego sends people up here and they've been here for 24 hours and now they're being referred in from the city of Vista. We know how the game is played. Shelters that don't have space or can't accommodate in the city of San Diego or other parts of the county may ship people to Vista. Now they've been in our parking lots, in our businesses for 24 hours, and now our shelter, our outreach workers are referring them to our shelters. We need to make sure that we are serving our own population, the children of the city of Vista. And I say the children because I have talked to too many parents in this city whose children are homeless. And I want to look them in the eye and say, your child will have first priority in our shelters, and they should. So I fully embrace their Escondido First approach, which says that they should provide to those with direct ties to their city first. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I also, and I don't think that's incompatible with the idea that there should be a regional solution, because certainly there are individuals who have lived in Escondido who now live in Vista, or the reverse. There are individuals who work in Vista, live in Escondido, or the reverse. Certainly, we're all very, we're all members of this North County community in addition to being residents of our specific cities. And I don't think those two things are in conflict with one another. It says that the city of Escondido, and this is the last statement, expects all local service providers to prioritize in helping unhoused Escondido residents before aiding individuals from other cities. Well, I think that's very much already the present policy. And I think that we have all agreed and we have all vocally given that direction that that is the policy of the city of Vista. What we have not done, and what I very much like about this policy, is that they wrote it down and they all agreed to it by vote. So we have already given that direction as a council verbally to staff, but I think it's very important as we move forward that we actually formalize this policy. And I think it's absolutely righteous that we should have all of our service providers that are receiving funding from the city of Vista to be on board with and share the vision that we're going to serve the needs of Vista residents first. I don't see any problem with that. So while there is some great consternation, what is really articulated here is a common sense approach to how not only we, number one, identify the true drivers and not ignore that affordability is a part of it, but not to accept a false narrative that narcotic drug addiction and mental illness are a minor player. No, in my opinion, and I believe the truth is that those things are the key drivers, the most significant drivers of chronic homelessness. And I think it's important that if we can't speak that truth, that we'll never get any closer to solving the problem. And I think it expresses a desire of the people that live in Escondido, and I think it's the desire of the people of Vista that they have a right to a clean and a safe community, that they expect that they're not going to lift more than their proportionate share of the population. Why would that not be a fair and just expectation also of our residents of the city of Vista? Of course it is. So when we really think about this, and if members of the public will read this 2-page document, I think that they'll discover in a fair-minded review that they entirely agree with the aims of this policy. And I believe that we should have such a policy. And so at this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Huerta to make a note that I direct to bring a policy, and I'll bring back the final language of it. But I'd like to get on an agenda for a future council meeting with a policy that is similar to this policy, where Vista is the operative city.
Thank you, Mayor, for presenting the policy as a proposal for our council. I think there's definitely an opportunity for consensus building there. You know, we certainly agree that we want to serve Vista residents, and not just with housing, but with jobs, with economic opportunity, with hope for the future, with education, with amenities, right, that we provide for our residents in the ways that they really need. And we are absolutely in agreement that we need to prevent substance abuse. And I'd say that we need to be doing way more of that than is outlined in this policy, because I really believe if we intervene sooner in mental and behavioral health, right? And I like to use the term behavioral health when I'm talking about things like substance abuse and mental illness, because it's the behavior and not the person that's a problem. It's certain behaviors that challenge not only norms, but the comforts and the safety of people around the person that is experiencing behavioral health irregularities. And so prevention, I think, is key. And sobriety is also a benefit. And what I think might be lacking here is a professional reflection on how sobriety is accomplished. And we can take a deep dive as to how we accomplish sobriety. Is it forced upon someone? If that were the case, then the drug addicts in jail who still manage to get drugs somehow, that's a bewildering circumstance to me, right? If you have completely cut yourself off from your supply, but you still have those behavioral health compulsions, what does sobriety look like? I also think that people want to see grace for those who are struggling. And in the case of our Buena Creek Navigation Center, I am proud to say that folks in our shelter will not be just kicked out to the street if they have a negative drug test or a positive drug test, rather. I think that the community is grateful to know that there is a place for people who are struggling and in a particular state in their change-making process where they still deserve dignity in a bed and in a place to sleep. Because two things can be true at once. That sobriety is incredibly valuable to the individual and the family and society, and people who are not sober deserve a warm and safe place to sleep. Those things are definitely true at the same time. And there's definitely a consensus on the dignity for all people, and I would like for there to be a greater acknowledgement of the impacts of poverty on the status of someone's both housing insecurity and homelessness. So it's not about, some sort of alarming policy that may or may not be well received by the council as a whole. Like I said, I think that there's opportunity for consensus here, but where are we putting our energy and where are we putting the majority of our efforts is definitely going to be the question at hand, because a policy could easily, with clear guidelines, turn into a program. And right now we do have programs that could be impacted by this policy perspective. So I'm always supportive of a conversation. I think you and I have very provocative conversations, and that's why I think that we were elevated to serve on the standing committee together. And as we continue to workshop what's best for Vista, I think bringing in more information about what is the path towards sobriety really look like from an empirical standpoint, right? What are the programs that actually result in sobriety, like lifelong sobriety? I think that's a big question. I don't know if we have answers for that. What is the impetus of our first responders to carry out a policy like this? And despite having followed every protocol that they were required to follow, our behavioral health response is not adequate. It really, I believe, Mayor, that it needs to start in the family. It needs to start with the day-to-day mental well-being of every single member of the families in Vista. It's more than prevention, it's a culture change where real resources are allocated to family crisis. We need more mediators. We need more peer-to-peer support. I believe, and I will wholeheartedly advocate that these issues, these bigger, like explosive issues that City of Escondido is dealing with, City of Vista, and Sanitas, all of us are dealing with, they start somewhere. They start with, a lot of times, family crisis, with economic crisis, with a whole host of material challenges that result in mental anguish and behavioral health crises. I would like to see, where does this start and how do we stop it for the next generation? And in that interim, I'm very, very pleased that we have a place for people to go, regardless of their substance use disorder. I do not want to take that option away from people, but I also support our higher barrier shelters. Operation Hope is a recipient of city funds and is a great example of a higher barrier shelter that does consider the fact that children and active substance users do not mix. So I think programs can oftentimes be very practical when they are a variety of programs to meet the community's needs. And a lot of the stuff in here, we're kind of already doing. So I'm a big fan of writing down policy and acknowledging the work that we're already doing. So if it's to highlight the work that we're doing and to enhance a commonly held vision and build consensus amongst our council about what does safety mean, when my neighbor walked through my fence, it was a different kind of safety issue that I had never experienced before. I can protect myself. I have a big dog at home. I've dealt with people wandering through my property before. I wasn't worried about that. I felt mentally unsafe because within my proximity, there was someone who I had known for years who was looking at me and talking to me in a very different way. And to see someone degrade like that in front of my eyes, it was very shocking. And I certainly don't have all the answers as to how we accomplish it. But I know that we need to intervene sooner because I don't want what happened to my neighbor to happen to other families. People who are in the thick of it, you know, if Escondido wants to say, hey, if you're in the thick of it, of your behavioral health crisis, we are not going to take liability for you anymore, right? If they want to do that, that's fine. I'm not okay with casting people aside in that way. I think we need to create spaces for people that are safe. I think that we've done that with the Buena Creek Navigation Center, and I do not want to jeopardize our work with the Buena Creek Navigation Center because it is a safe space for people. So I hope you can see that I think there's probably opportunity for consensus building and a policy that evaluates safety and homelessness and public welfare and poverty and really incorporates a lot of these different ideas.
You talked about substance abuse prevention, you know, in all the conversations we've had, we've not really talked about what we can do as a city. I benefited from the drug awareness resistance education, DARE. That program was derided, I think unfairly. It was a great program as a student going through it. I didn't know a lot about drugs. Thank God I was raised in a family where I wasn't exposed to it as a child. And so some of the things I learned and strategies I learned about being able to resist. And the first time that I was offered drugs, I was probably one person in a group of 8 and everyone else partook. And I said, no, I'm good. I knew because of the great upbringing I had that I wanted no part of it. It is tragic in the extreme that we have normalized narcotic drugs. We have normalized narcotic drug addiction, and we've normalized bringing it into the country, manufacturing it, sale of it. We've decriminalized it, and we've got this completely broken experiment in criminal justice reform that's destroying our communities. Criminal use of narcotic drugs is destructive to the human mind, the human body, the human spirit. We should not tolerate it. The war on drugs, often derided. The reality is, I agree with you when you ask the question, what are we doing to try and teach young people not to use drugs and to stay away from them? I was extremely troubled last night when we were at the Youth Commission dinner meeting, and my little sister, who's now the mother of my little 4-month-old nephew, who I'm very proud of, still lives here in Vista. She was an RBV graduate. What is it, 7 or 8 years ago? Maybe it's 9 or 10 years ago now. But when she was in school, she couldn't use the girls' restroom because of all the drug use and the gangs. And that was one of the questions I asked last night, was about the bathrooms at RBV. I asked, are the restrooms unlocked? And the answer was no. Most of them are still locked because of all the illegal activity and the threatening activity that takes place. But the first comments that came back when I asked about the bathrooms were, they smell like marijuana. They always smell like marijuana. The fact that our schools have, we had a school board that eliminated school resource officers from our schools. And then only in an election year did they restore school resource officers, and they did not do it on a permanent basis. Our Vista Unified School District restored school resource officers with one-time monies. And when those one-time monies are gone, they have not made a commitment to fund them long-term. As we said on Thursday, 40% of that funding for the school resource officers comes from the city of Vista. So as far as I'm concerned, the city of Vista has made a long-term commitment to pay for school resource officers. How can it be that we have not prioritized eliminating the use of marijuana and tobacco and alcohol and all other narcotic drugs from our schools? I'm dumbfounded by that, that our kids have to be exposed to. So maybe something that we could agree on is, and I don't know what we can do. I mean, we've had North Coastal Prevention Coalition here talking to us forever, but what can we do to work with the schools? I'd love to work with the schools to try and get a program like DARE back into the schools. I thought it was great getting law enforcement into the schools so that young people in the community can learn that law enforcement is here to serve and to protect us, not to hurt us, that we as a society have hired them to protect us, to serve our interests, that they are public servants, not somebody to be afraid of, that they could look at the school resource officer, as I did the school resource officer of the school that I grew up in, as somebody who was a protector, somebody who was a friend of the community. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues here, but I want to focus on the substance abuse prevention amongst underage persons. If you want to talk about, I would love to talk about and ask staff to look at ideas. I know we've taken some of the marijuana money and invested in youth prevention, but probably not nearly enough. I would really like to get to the bottom of the drug problem in our schools, because that is out of control. As we heard from, we had 15 students of our RBV, I think they were all RBV last night, and at RBV, and so I'm sure it's at Vista and all the other schools, the drug use is out of control. And yes, if we want to prevent homelessness, then we need to talk kids out of being addicted to narcotic drugs. That's absolutely important. You talked about forced sobriety, in Rhode Island and New York State and a lot of very liberal states on the Eastern Seaboard. They absolutely mandate forced sobriety through their courts. We used to do it here in California. And no, I don't think that forced sobriety is necessarily going to yield a lifetime of sobriety. I think the only thing that brings a lifetime of sobriety is the change in the person that causes them to want to do that. But I do think that you can help a large number of people, maybe not even a majority, but I think you can help a large number of people find I think you can help them reset and find center so that they can pursue their own sobriety, so that they can start working on it through forced sobriety. I advocate for forced sobriety, particularly as a consequence when the addiction to narcotic drugs has manifested itself as criminal behavior, and the individual should be brought then for their criminal behavior, whether it's theft or assault or whatever it is, they should be brought before a judge. And I think at that point, we had this thing called drug court. It still exists, but we don't use it anymore because we've decriminalized everything. And this is where I say the great social justice reform, or the criminal justice reform movement, by decriminalizing all of these misdemeanor crimes or by failing to seek prosecution for them, what we have done is we have said we're not going to give that individual who suffers substance abuse disorder the opportunity to come before a judge and be sentenced to a course of treatment. That is wrong. That was a great opportunity that we had for individuals to come and to have an experience of sobriety, even if it was forced. I highly support forced sobriety, particularly for those people whose behavior has manifested itself as criminal behavior through our drug courts. Very important. You said the community wants grace for those who are struggling. I couldn't agree more. I've actually taken a very importantly nuanced approach to the housing first question. I specifically, my point of view is that forcing housing first on all housing providers is wrong because it denies the ability for children and those recovering from addiction to live in sobriety. I am not specifically opposed to offering somebody an opportunity to get housed and stabilized as they pursue sobriety. I am strictly opposed, however, to the use of the term harm reduction as relates to our shelter, because harm reduction goes much further than to be agnostic about narcotic drug use. Harm reduction implies directly, if you go out and just Google this term, comes right up. It's like the first hit. It implies that we are going to enable the behavior by providing crack pipes and drug needles and tourniquets, and providers in the San Francisco Bay Area were quoted in the San Francisco Chronicle as saying, it's a shame we can't provide the drug to them because then we would know that they're getting a good drug. You know, I think providing crack pipes to people and needles is not beneficial. I don't believe that the data, and I've studied this data, we've talked about it, we did a measure a while back. I've talked publicly on television about the needle exchange programs. The data are very clear. They are not beneficial. I don't support them. I don't want the county at Buena Creek Navigation Center. I want them to be excluded from the facility by policy. But make sure we get this into the policy. I don't want them there handing out crack pipes to the people that we're trying to help. I'm sorry, I don't. And I think the community will support that. You talked about the behavioral health response not being adequate. I don't know if you've been to the county mental health hospital on Rosecrans. I think I'm probably one of the very few mayors or council people who took the time to go and see it myself a couple of weeks ago. I toured it with Dr. Bergman. We have only 85 beds for the whole county that are publicly funded. It's completely unacceptable. We have not prioritized the facilities to help people who are struggling with mental health. And so you're right, there's been it was not good and it wasn't not right that we were waiting for those with substance abuse disorder and mental health disorder to manifest as criminals, their disorders. We were waiting for them to commit a crime, and then we were serving their needs institutionally in the jails and the prisons. That did not make sense, but after 45 years ago, a Democrat-controlled Congress and a Republican president eliminated funding for federal mental health facilities nationwide, that was the only service that was left. And you mentioned the point I made 2 days ago. The point I made was there's a lot of people like to blame policymakers from 45 years ago, most of whom are dead now. And what I would just say is it's on us, it's on our generation to make the policies going forward. And we need to advocate for policies at the state, the federal level, and the county to fund those. Clearly, we don't have the resources to fund the entire response to the mental health crises we have through the city of Vista. You talked about, not casting people aside who have addiction. I don't want to cast anybody aside. I want to help every person who says, I want help. Please help me. I'm willing to accept the help that you're offering. I want to know that we have offered shelter, that we've offered drug rehabilitation, abuse rehabilitation. I want to know that we've offered the medical care. Right now, we're even offering dental care through Vista Community Clinic at the Buena Creek Nav Center. I would say there's no accommodation that we wouldn't want to provide to people who are in need if they are saying yes and doing the things that are asked of them to be on the road to recovery, to put their lives back together because they're embracing the tools we're offering. Those individuals who refuse our offers of help, though, who demonstrate that they have no desire to recover their lives, those are the ones that we need to pursue conservatorship for. Those are the ones that we need to, when their behavior manifests itself as criminal behavior, we need to prosecute. There needs to be, as my friend Donnie D., who runs the rescue mission in San Diego, says, there needs to be some enforcement to encourage people to accept the help that we're offering. It can't be like the shoplifting where we never enforce it, and so it's a free-for-all. And that's what we have. We have a free-for-all right now because we have this wrong-minded experiment with criminal justice reform that flies in the face of 10,000 years of human history. Just suddenly in the last few years, we've decided not to punish people for breaking our laws or violating our societal norms. That doesn't work. We have to have consequences for violating societal norms. It's like every single child has to be punished for antisocial behavior towards their sibling. You can't walk up and smack your brother in the head and take their toy. It's not right. You have to be corrected for that. There have to be guide rails, and there have to be a way to correct people who are committing antisocial behavior, particularly when it's been defined as criminal conduct. So I think we can get there, because I think, I just think this is all common sense. I don't think there's anything out there in anything I've said. I think it's like, I think 80% of the people in our city would completely agree with it. So I appreciate you giving me the time to articulate all that. I know it's a lot, but like you said, I think it's important to write these things down. We're not always of a like mind, so when we get them on paper, then the city management can be very clear-minded about what the direction is, and I think that's very important.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
I know the request was to bring this back to a future agenda item, city council agenda item.
Yes.
At that time, would you like staff to come with something prepared, or is it a discussion for the city council to have?
I think per our
policy.
That's a good question. I think per our standing policy, because it's the direction of a single member of the council, I think it's just a discussion item. But I will bring at that time an amended version. I'll try and provide that in advance so that folks can have an opportunity to read it and opine on it. But I will, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a very few changes to this Escondido policy, which I really think is a great policy. And I'm going to bring that, and we can discuss every element of it.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Let me make a note. What was the thing I said we got to add in there?
For let's see, let me go back. There were quite a few comments that were made. So
I'll follow up with you offline.
Oh, okay, no, okay, that's fine.
Unless you have the one thing I said, we got to make sure we include.
So you wanted a similar policy, let's see, you wanted to.
That's okay.
For sobriety.
I'll go back and watch it on the video.
I'll send out the notes after this meeting.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you for your comments, and I look forward to further discussion. I'm curious, you're bringing up harm reduction. I haven't referenced that at this time, but I do know that the ability for someone to enter into our Buena Creek Navigation Center and have a space to sleep without proving sobriety is part of that gradient of harm reduction. I'm curious to know what you think, Mayor, about alternative therapies and psychedelic medicine, clinical uses of things like psychedelic mushrooms and these alternative therapies, right, that may have the potential to heal mental illness. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know anything about it. I don't have any experience with any magic mushrooms, but I'm an open-minded person, and I will read about it. I love to learn about everything, so I'm happy to become educated on the subject.
I appreciate, I think we both agree that narcotic use is incredibly damaging. So I think we can have further discussions about that and maybe even talk about the history of the use in the United States and how some of those products have entered communities and damaged communities. But as always, I really appreciate the time to work together. I think that was our final item for the day, so I will just clarify that. I don't believe we have any oral communications. I think we're clear. And with that, if there are no further comments, thank you, Mayor. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to staff.